Here we are, sitting down for our first podcast about Twin Peaks. Welcome. Hello, Cameron.
Hello, Mike. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good.
It's good to hear.
Yeah, so we have titled this podcast, Drink Full and Descend, a fanatical analysis of Twin Peaks.
Mm-hmm.
Fanatical meaning that...
Well, it's really just that we're really big fans of the show.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we're not going to burn people on crosses or anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not going to over-analyze. We're only over-analyzing here.
Yeah, we're only going to overanalyze to the appropriate extent.
Yeah.
Of overanalyzing.
Yeah. So both huge fans of the show, and as we're witnessing it ongoing now, we've just crossed over episode 8 of The Return, and we decided let's make a podcast. Let's discuss this stuff and analyze it in a recorded manner so that we can really dive deep and discuss.
Yeah, and I mean, at least from my perspective, I think that's what I really want to do here. Hopefully it goes well. Hopefully people out there are sort of into this, to think about the series and, as you say, really kind of try to dig deep into it, really have an attention to detail, right? And work on, drawing connections, discussing our theories, interpretations, all of that kind of stuff, right? So the idea here isn't just to, give you like a recap of what happened so much as it is to really try to delve into Twin Peaks and sort of the mythology of it and the ideas that are at play here and sort of all of that, right?
Yep. So we're going to analyze, we're going to jump down a few rabbit holes, and then we're going to hopefully escape back out of those rabbit holes.
Hopefully we won't get too lost.
Yes. And we want to really kind of touch base on everything that could be going on as the show is going on, so that it's not just us in retrospect talking about how cool that phenomenon was when it came back, that we can analyze it as it goes, because as we all know, that gum we're enjoying is come back into style.
It's come back into style, indeed. And you know what? I mean, at first when The Return was starting, I didn't really like the idea of having to wait a week or a couple of weeks to get more. But I have to say, I have settled into appreciating that. It gives us time to digest, discuss, do things like this.
Exactly.
We're in the thick of the thing that's happening again.
It's a great feeling
right?
that it's ongoing now. We don't yet know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
I can't remember hardly what it was like to not know what happened in the original run.
Right.
Right. It was such a while ago for me, I think for you as well. Neither of us were watching it as it aired. We were maybe a little young, but shortly after that.
Yeah.
Right?
Within a few years, within 4 or 5 years, I was definitely watching the VHS tapes of it.
Maybe a little longer for me, but still, I mean, it's 2017. The show aired in 1990, right? So 91, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it certainly is exciting to get more Twin Peaks. I'm looking forward to getting into this.
Yep, and just the fact that it's relevant again. It's no longer me telling younger people like, hey, there was a show back in the 90s that was awesome.
Indeed.
It's saying, hey, no, there's a show with heritage that is on now.
Yeah.
And the fact that Twin Peaks is relative again is amazing. So join us. Let's get into this. Just so everybody knows tonight, there will be some spoilers. So if you do not yet know who killed Laura Palmer... then this might not be one of the podcasts you want to jump into right away. We're going to discuss all the original season. We are going to be referencing, like we said, The Secret History, but we are going to reserve all of our analysis of The Return starting next episode. So this episode is going to be everything we need to know leading up to The Return. And
yeah, right. So, I mean, I think we're basically presuming that at some point over the last 25 or 26 years, you may have taken the time to watch Twin Peaks, right?
Yep.
Firewalk with me. Hopefully you have, presumably you have, if you are clicking on a Twin Peaks podcast, I would think. But that's the basic plan. That tonight we're going to stick to the original run of the show, Firewalk with me, maybe go a bit into some of the stuff from The Secret History, etc. But no spoilers in this one for The Return.
Yes, which is good because we want a foundation to build off, because next podcast we're going to really dive deep into The Return, and I'm really excited to kind of go through that stuff. I personally have been a Lynch fan for a long time, and I think that there was a point in his career where it would be unsure whether or not he could pull off a television series, right?
Well, certainly you wouldn't think that the guy who made Eraserhead was going to all of a sudden be making a show for network primetime TV, right?
Right.
If you go back to, well, you have the short films before Eraserhead, but of course Eraserhead is very weird.
Mm-hmm.
If anyone listening hasn't seen it, I recommend it. I recommend all of Lynch's work, really, right?
Right.
But this weird career path where apparently then, right, Mel Brooks saw Eraserhead and loved it. Right, we were talking about this the other day.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he saw it with Stanley Kubrick, but might have to check my sources on that. But Stanley Kubrick also loved Eraserhead.
Yeah, I have read the legendary Stanley Kubrick seeing it and being quite impressed by such a young filmmaker pulling something like that off and doing private screenings of it.
Right. And so Mel Brooks pulls in David Lynch to do Elephant Man, and then things get going, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the work that is, I think, really what comes to mind when you think of David Lynch are things, to me, most like Eraserhead, Mulholland Drive, Lost Highway, Blue Velvet, of course.
Can't forget Wild at Heart in there.
Oh, yeah, Wild at Heart. Although Wild at Heart is kind of distinctive because it's so kind of fast.
Yeah.
Right? That's how I... But, yeah, all of those are, strange films, right? And that there's always this sense in Lynch of a kind of incompleteness, right? Or something like this, right? That you can't sort of fully make sense of and interpret everything. And some of us love that, I guess. Maybe not everyone. But.
Yeah, I was always attracted to it. And just to kind of give a little bit more of the bio of him as a young man. So, right, and correct me if I'm wrong, but, so he comes from Missoula and ends up in his college years going to Philadelphia to study art. In that time, I remember reading something about how one of the first things he did after graduating was paint his apartment black to start working on Eraserhead. So it seemed to me that from the very beginning, he's committed to, that his space that he's living in is a space for producing art. And if you look at the early college films like The Grandmother or something, I think from very early on, he is already making waves at, like you're saying, doing something that's very provocative, but that doesn't give you all the answers as to what's going on. And I've heard him in interviews and also in writings discussing his fascination just with a good mystery, how mystery itself is something that will cause the viewer, the onlooker, to then trigger more curiosity and to then kind of think about the nature of life and their own lives a little bit more. So when I interpret it that way, I feel like even the early stuff is in some sense almost therapeutic, where he's giving his audience something to bite into that will help them in their own lives and be inspiring, but just to plant that seed of mystery where it's actually up to you to figure out what's going on here.
Well, and also, it seems pretty clear to me, at least often, Lynch himself does not know, right? That, of course he knows what he's doing, but he's perfectly happy creating a work of art, making a film, what have you, and just sort of pulling inspiration from his own unconscious or getting into sort of dream logic or whatever. Right. And he just seems to be, it seems to me that he's fully comfortable with not understanding it fully himself.
Correct. And I feel like with him, it's always like an experiment. It's always a learning process. And I think that he likes messing with the rules. For example, we were talking the other day about the first DVD release for Mulholland Drive,
right?
Where the insert actually came with something like David Lynch's top 10 clues to figuring out Mulholland Drive. And
what does the key mean?
Yeah, to pay attention to the blue key.
Of course you paid attention to the blue key,
right? And so I remember thinking, like, David Lynch, are you just messing with me? Are these real clues, or is this more mystery, adding another layer of, shall I say, subterfuge to add to the mystery? Which I'm currently undergoing right now because I'm finishing up reading The Secret History of Twin Peaks, where we have something that was known thing like Mulholland Drive screening in theaters, that once you get a later copy of it and revisit it, somehow the mystery is actually thickened and there's more to it now.
Right, it's just kind of, and I think that goes with most, if not, well, most of Lynch's films, that sort of the more you engage with them, sort of the deeper the mystery gets, right? Because you might think, you have an interpretation of Lost Highway or Mulholland Drive come to mind. You can interpret these, right?
Yes.
But then it seems like you always find that you've put these weird pieces together, the kind of non-linear story. You found a way to sort of make it linear, and then one thing you'll notice that just doesn't fit.
Right.
Right.
So again, the mystery, the question of it. And the thing is, there's, I think, a lot of projects that are out there that have a great level of mystery to them and can do that in a narrative. But you combine that with just the sheer brilliance of the sound design and visually what he does in all of his projects. And, it always just kind of knocks me on the floor about how beautiful it is.
Right. I mean, one story from Lynch, he's in art school. He's painting. He still paints. I believe he still paints, last I knew. But he tells the story somewhere. It's in maybe Lynch on Lynch book or something like that, where he basically just talks about wanting to see his painting move. So, I mean, it seems like he got into film because he was painting, and he was like, I want to make a moving painting.
Right.
Right.
That's fascinating.
And he's always, and this also I think makes him kind of distinctive in terms of directors or auteurs, whatever term we want. He's always paid a lot of attention to the sound.
Correct, yeah.
Right,
And in the new one, he's credited doing full sound design himself.
He's had that collaboration with Angelo Badalamenti for years, and Lynch himself just has always, it seems, cared a whole lot about the sound, right? I mean, I recall seeing Inland Empire in the theater. There was this low bass hum the entire time that I felt like I could feel in my gut.
Right.
And I don't even know if you could get that watching it at home.
Yeah.
Right.
Couple statements about that just real quick. First of all, if the audience can hear that right now, there is actually a low bass hum and a beat that is visiting us now, coming in from the other studios around us, and interference, which I think is quite appropriate to be discussing a David Lynch project. And we have some extra sound coming in through the wires and the interference that's happening.
If it creates a ubiquitous sense of dread, that's fine.
That's good with us. Yeah. The other thing is, when I first started watching The Return, I wasn't watching it with external speakers, and I have a flat screen television, and really the types of frequencies that he's using in those low hums that you're talking about, that doesn't exist in the average television show or the average thing that you'd watch on TV. And it was of a certain frequency that kind of hit a chord with my TV, and sort of suddenly things on my desk and my television are rattling.
Oh, wow.
And I'm thinking, wow, the technology is not good enough to screen a David Lynch project on.
Well, he did say something recently where he recommended watching it with headphones in a dark room.
Yep, as close as
with
you
your
can
eyes
get.
as close to the screen as you could get.
Which and I think the point he said with that is, then he added something to that saying, then you're really in a different place.
Yeah.
So really what he's talking is, using our senses to really transport us into another dimension, should I say. I think that's a very valid thing when you're talking about a Lynch project.
Right. And don't watch it on your phone.
And definitely don't watch it on your damn cell phone.
You will think you've seen the film.
Yes, you've only
but
seen
you
half
won't.
of it that way.
It's such a sadness.
Yeah, so we're with him there.
Yeah.
Another thing you say is his wanting to take his paintings and make them move. That reminds me of a couple things. First of all, very early in his career, in his short films, one of them, I don't know if I'm getting the title right, but I think it's Three Men Getting Sick, which is basically a stop-motion animation that's on a canvas. And it's very stylistic, and it's obviously his style of art. It's also quite creepy. So we recommend that to the audience to check that out. But that is literally him making an animation from his paintings, from his canvas. And then years later, the other thing it reminds me of is Dumbland, where he's doing the series Dumbland, which is pretty much, I don't know what program he uses, but it's just like Paint or early, digital painting program, where he's making a cartoon and animation, but it's digital this time, and he's making paintings move again. And of course, you have his signature characters, the extremity of characters and emotion, and also I think kind of a socioeconomic critique of America. So Dumbland, when I first saw Dumbland, that knocked me down also.
Yeah.
I loved that because it's just so inherently such a simple tool, seemingly. But again, the sound design in that is incredible. He's just very basic 2D, no color, just single stroke animation. And it's fantastic. How many people could pull that off,
Well, I mean, if you're as big a fan as me, you can enjoy hearing David Lynch give you a weather report.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Or a recipe for quinoa.
Right, the recipe for quinoa is good. Or when he was selling his David Lynch coffee, right? Did you see the commercials for him selling his coffee?
Oh, I don't think I did.
Oh, they're fantastic.
I tried his coffee. It was all right.
Is it good? Yeah.
It was good. I wasn't like exceptional. Right.
But the fact that he's
coffee.
like, if I'm going to put a product out there other than my imagination,
Right.
damn it, it's going to be coffee. But his commercials are really great. One of them I remember stuck out where it's just it's like a little Barbie doll head that's disembodied that he's holding in his hand. Actually, it might not be disembodied. I don't remember exactly. I just have the impression of that because it's in his hand. It's like a close-up of the Barbie doll head. And he's doing the voice, and it seems like just a little camera in his hand and the Barbie doll head. And he's talking to it like, oh, I'm going to make you some coffee. And she's like, oh, please make me some coffee. And it's just so ridiculous that you could just... He's like, that's my coffee commercial. I used a Barbie doll head, and it worked. And it's
when
really...
he made a commercial about rats in New York City a long time ago,
right.
too. But, okay, so we should push forward, probably, right here. So Lynch teams up with Mark Frost for the
correct
Twin Peaks.
So you were telling me recently Mark Frost also had a kind of a previous television history going with, what was the show?
Right, if people don't know, Mark Frost was an established television writer, basically. He worked on Hill Street Blues, some other things that were before my time, basically, for the most part. But I do think it's worth noting that with Twin Peaks, you have David Lynch, who is an established, experimental auteur, basically, right? Make weird, surrealist films, or maybe that term's not even quite right. His own distinctive things going on. Combining then with Mark Frost, who knows how to do television, right? So you get what ends up being this really weird show, and maybe why it struck a chord with people even originally was that it was so sort of distinctive and different from what people were used to seeing on TV, right?
Correct. Yeah, I think it was breaking records for its popularity at the time and just having kind of an ongoing mystery with cliffhangers. People were talking about it the next day kind of thing, but never had you seen that in anything that was quite so off the cuff, right?
Well, right. And all of a sudden you had people were gathering to watch Twin Peaks. Right. People weren't scheduling and gathering together to watch Murder, She Wrote. Right. And nothing against Murder, She Wrote. It's fine. But that wasn't like appointment television. Right. And it really seems like Twin Peaks, maybe was the first show where you really felt that kind of thing, where people felt like they had to see it so they could talk to people about it. Right. And you'd feel left out of the culture if you weren't up to speed. And of course, you also, maybe we should bear in mind the history there, right? I mean, we're going back to the early 90s. You had to actually watch it as it aired. Yeah. Right? Millennials, right? You couldn't have your Netflix.
Yeah, I think that's something that is not even understood now. Even we who used to have that as the scenario are so used to being able to choose when we want to watch something. Yeah. Also, without commercials. I was thinking about it recently. Imagine watching The Return, where suddenly 15 minutes in it, a big commercial for a car salesman or whatever, comes on TV. That would be unbearable by today's standard. Twin Peaks was also canceled, right? They didn't get the full run that they were expecting to get?
Right. So basically, there seemed to be a number of factors there. Maybe because of all of the hype and how popular it had become, they started to feel a lot of pressure to resolve that central mystery. Who killed Laura Palmer, right? That's what everyone was talking about. People had their theories. You have Saturday Night Live sketches and stuff. And apparently the network in particular really started pressuring Lynch and Frost on that front. Lynch has said in at least one interview that if it had been entirely up to him, he never would have revealed who killed Laura Palmer.
Oh, nice.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, just leave that in the background. We're doing other stuff, and that's just going to keep lingering, right? But they resolved that, so we know now who killed Laura Palmer. And Lynch and Frost were maybe less involved than they had been in the show. The network also started messing with their time slot, right? Which... I mean, if you think about this show, you kind of can't miss an episode, right? Again, it's not like Murder, She Wrote. And if it had this thing going where it was like appointment TV, well, then if you start changing that time slot, that's significant. They lost viewers.
It's really going to mess with the viewership. Yeah.
But it really, it does seem like it had this kind of meteoric rise and fall, right? It's super, super popular. and then quickly canceled.
There's something to be said about the question who killed Laura Palmer itself, like as a marketing thing. I think within 10 years later, you get The Matrix, and that was a big part of The Matrix. I remember right away. It was, what is The Matrix? Was the first thing you ever thought or were introduced to about that project. Same with Twin Peaks. It was like, who killed Laura Palmer was a question you would be familiar with before you ever heard the phrase Twin Peaks. And I think just from a marketing perspective, once that question is posed, suddenly you're asking that question too. So it's got this built-in question that you need answered to it. So the mystery started, like, hit the ground running. There's this mystery that I've got to solve. So I think from the very beginning, as opposed to a lot of other shows that, would either have an arc story that you were constantly getting fed, or were just intriguing because the characters on the show, this show really said, wait, there's something here that you have to figure out. And I think that's also a motif with Lynch, with Mulholland Drive, or some other things like that there's definitely this heavy mystery from the get-go.
Right, and so it is a murder mystery, right? Laura Palmer's body is found wrapped in plastic. But as we were talking about, it's also pretty quickly a different kind of mystery, right? There's sort of a duality to that mystery, that on the one hand you want to know who killed Laura Palmer, but things quickly deepen and become strange and bizarre, at least once we get to Cooper's dream a couple episodes in, right? The first time we see the Red Room and Mike Anderson dancing in the Red Room and all of that, right? We start getting this question of what's going on there, right?
Right, the introduction of maybe possibly a metaphysical aspect to the show and the murder.
Right, the man from another place. I mean, if you remember that dream, basically Cooper dreams that he's in the Red Room. In the dream, he is older, right? They've got Kyle MacLachlan in, like, old man makeup, okay? And the first person he sees is the man from another place, Michael J. Anderson, right? Who says, "Let's rock." This is weird, right? And that whole style, right? I'm hoping people listening to this are probably familiar with, of where they recorded the dialogue backwards and then played it forward. Is that the way to put this, I guess?
Yeah. I think the actors all trained and rehearsed how to speak backwards, and that was recorded. And then when you flip the recording in reverse, then it's going forward. And
right, so it sounds
intelligible.
Yeah, exactly, right. And apparently that was just like a skill that Michael J. Anderson already had, and he trained other people to do it. I heard. Anyway, so you get that scene, and he says just things with no context, like, that gum you like is coming back into style, or is going to come back into style. And if you remember, then Cooper wakes up from that dream, and he calls Sheriff Truman and says, "I know who killed Laura Palmer," right? Like,
correct, right?
But no, he doesn't. He just, that sense that this dream was giving him the information that he needed, and he just needed to interpret what was going on there, right?
And from that, we get the Tibetan take where he's throwing stones at the bottles,
yes,
and that's he's figuring out a methodology to solve the crime.
Yeah, right. So it's already very early on playing on that level that is more, intuitive, if you want to call that. Call it intuitive as opposed to rational, right?
Right.
There's nothing really rational about throwing rocks at bottles to try to figure out murder suspects.
Right.
Right. That's weird.
Right.
You mentioned Tibet all you want. That's weird. And that whole level is there really from the beginning. But it does get, particularly some of the stuff in the second season, end of the second season, it becomes more and more clear that there are real questions here, right? That there do seem to be, like, real beings who are Bob and so on and so forth, right? Not just a metaphor. It becomes sort of increasingly clear.
Right. I remember very specifically, by the time we find out that Leland is inhabited by Bob, up until around that time, you could still tell yourself, like, there's a part where Albert says it where, maybe Bob is just the evil that men do.
Yeah.
And you can still interpret it as, how do you explain father raping and killing his own daughter, But there's a very specific turn where it's metaphysical, and suddenly there's these demonic entities that exist in their own right that are, there's this demon possession thing that's happening. But I think there's that very specific point where it flips, and you're saying, "Oh, I thought I understood the nature of reality in this scenario, but now there's this whole new watershed moment of understanding."
Right. But I mean, that's even potentially not until that last episode of season 2.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because, okay, sure, you have Leland looking in the mirror and seeing Bob's face.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all right, maybe it's just a symbol, right? Or something like that. I think that you could potentially interpret almost everything in the original series along those lines, sort of deflationary reading, if you want to call it that,
Mm-hmm.
right? But once you get Cooper, entering the lodge or the Red Room
Mm-hmm.
through curtains that appear at Glastonbury Grove, and all of that stuff going on in that last episode of season 2, you'd really struggle to interpret that without recognizing that Bob, the Arm, I'm just going to call him the Arm, the man from another place is the Arm,
Right.
the Giant, Mike, and so on, right? The one-armed man. It's really clear that these are existing beings, right?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Well, even shows in that scene, Sheriff Truman is sitting there witnessing it, so he's the ultimate skeptic that's there, and he's not buying Coop's Tibetan stuff and all this, really.
Mhm.
But he even is sitting there witnessing it and is shocked to see, like, oh, yeah, I've just encountered a metaphysical situation where he's witnessed this thing that's happening that he can't explain.
Well, he's at least, you mean he witnesses Dale disappear, go into the lodge.
Correct,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
But and even the curtains are shown from the outside of the Red Room for a moment before they dissipate again. And so the question becomes, if he has seen that, he's kind of in like one of these oh my god moments. That
Yeah.
even Andy joins him after and is like, hey, can I get you a plate special or whatever?
Right.
And Andy hasn't witnessed, doesn't understand like how deep lost in thought, because now Sheriff Truman is questioning everything about what he thought about the nature of reality.
Right. Although I always thought he was an interesting character because he's a kind of no-nonsense guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
His name's Harry S. Truman.
Mm-hmm.
He has a deer head on his wall that's underneath it says the buck stopped here,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which is a great joke. But he always seemed kind of open to Cooper's weirdness and, right? I mean, you don't see Sheriff Truman shutting Cooper down, right? It's like, oh, what, you want to go throw rocks at bottles because Tibet?
Yeah.
All right, let's do it,
Yeah,
right?
Helps him do that, yeah.
So I think that's interesting. I still think you're right. I mean, insofar as if now Harry has actually seen those curtains appear, seen Cooper go where, right? He stakes it out, right? If you recall, he sits there all night waiting for Cooper to reappear.
Yeah.
But of course we should also remember that Truman is more keyed into the weirdness than it might seem at first with the Bookhouse Boys thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's always been this weirdness or this darkness in these woods, right? And Harry Truman and others are involved in this group of the Bookhouse Boys who...
Yeah, that's true. They do define that earlier on, that's part of why the Bookhouse Boys exists. But to see him... He's so lost in thought in that moment when he witnesses it. Like, Andy can't get through to him. And even when he's answering questions, he's like, yeah, whatever. He's so lost in this moment of really, I think, questioning the reality because finally there's the evidence. He's witnessing it. Of course, he's always also worried about Coop and wondering, okay, has the darkness just won? Are we ever going to, get through this?
Is Coop ever going to come back?
Yeah.
Right?
Okay, so let's discuss for a minute interpretations. If somebody walks up to you and says, what is Twin Peaks about? And we've joked about this because there's so many things you can describe that would be fitting, and there's really nothing you could say that would be completely accurate.
Yeah, I think we talked about it in terms of even thinking about what constitutes a spoiler, right? Mm-hmm. Because who killed Laura Palmer?
Right.
Well, if all you know is that her dad did it,
yeah, you still
hardly know anything,
yeah,
right?
Exactly. Well, there's a big interpretation that I hear on the Net that is pretty apparent just from the very beginning in the intro of the show, where you see the symbology of nature, right? The bird sitting on the branch. Mm-hmm. And then the next thing you see is a mill, which is, set up there to manufacture and cut down the wood and basically strip the forest of that bird's home. So right away we get the man versus nature thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that kind of runs through in a certain way, and this tension, right? Because you're absolutely right. You see the bird, the waterfall, and then the mill, right? And but the whole town is sort of based on that mill, right? At least historically speaking. So that kind of theme about how our own livelihood is predicated on a certain kind of destruction of life, or that tension between man and nature, as you put it, I think is certainly there. But also a duality in sort of human nature, right? So I don't even know if it says cut and dry, right? So as human beings, are we fully separate from nature? Arguably not, right?
Right, but then there's the duality that comes up examining the doppelganger scenarios, examining that the show's title and the town is also under the shadow of Twin Mountains, Twin Peaks itself. That there are very many characters that share a character name with another character that sometimes is aligned with that character and sometimes can be perceived as kind of a polar opposite. So there's definitely kind of a duality yin-yang thing besides man versus nature.
Right, and so many of the characters through the original run show these kinds of dual aspects of their personality. I mean, I'm almost tempted to say all of them do, but maybe it's not quite all of them. But with almost all of the characters, it seems like there's like a good version or a bad version, right? Or maybe think about Ben Horn, right? At one point in season 2, he tries to be good. He starts eating carrots instead of smoking cigars, right? But you also see it with someone like Hank, who's a terrible murderer, criminal, right? But at moments, he seems like, I don't know, maybe he's kind of genuinely caring about Norma in the diner and stuff like that, right?
Or just in general, Laura being the prom queen and being the, beautiful symbol of innocence, but then her secret life represented through her diary and what, she really gets up to at night kind of stuff. You do have those splits within one character's psyche. And then you see it also physically, like on the map itself that we find out about later. You see the giant right next to the small person that's apparently going to be the man from the arm, I would call him.
It's kind of I always want to call him the arm.
Yeah.
And people don't know, really, that comes from Fire Walk With Me, where we have a scene with him where he says, I am the arm, and I sound like this, right? So from that point on, I just started calling him the arm, right? It's simpler than anything else.
And then considering the duality, we also have in some way this kind of like meta-analysis of the show of the duality of the mystery itself, right? The duality of the story itself, the different ways that you can perceive this. Is this small-town murder noir that is basically, and we mentioned this earlier, basically just kind of an evil person that is committing the worst act you can think of? Or is this the duality of, we can perceive this as, pure demon possession, and how much of Leland's involvement in that you can debate, but...
Right, and it seems like it's kind of neither or both or something like that, right? It's even when you have the idea that Bob inhabited Leland, even if we're rolling with this as Bob is really responsible for killing Laura or whatever, Leland does seem to have at least invited Bob in. But beyond that, right, it's not like humanity's off the hook, because you've got all these other characters who do really evil shit, and Bob's not involved, right? Bob doesn't possess Leo or Ben Horn or Hank or any of the Renaults, right? I mean, so even though you have this weird stuff with these spirits, it certainly doesn't seem to be letting humanity off the hook, right? And I think that is important.
Another great thing about the show, of course, is the characters.
Right.
Right. This is something that makes the show stand out from a lot of the other shows that were happening at the time. They're not rote characters. They're not common characters you would find that are assigned based on the type of narrative you're telling. They're very unique and they're very quirky. And that's, I think, one of the strong points of the show is just the characters themselves.
Right, and they are definitely quirky, right? But there's another level I always thought where they feel very real, right? They feel like real people, fleshed out characters, even the most minor, right? It seems from what I've heard that when Lynch casts people, he doesn't have them do line readings or anything. You heard this?
No. What is
I guess, well, from stories actors have told, basically, he generally just sits and has a conversation with them.
Mm-hmm.
So it almost seems to me like he casts people, right? He doesn't bring someone in and say, "Hey, read this scene for me." Rather, they'll talk about cars or something. And be like, yeah, you're going to be this character. And I don't know if that plays a role in it, but it's always seemed to me that even sort of the most minor character in Lynch's work has a way of feeling like a real person. Right.
Which is something I was examining earlier. We were watching some of the Tonight Show interviews with David Lynch by some of the different talk show hosts. And there was this tendency to say, oh, Lynch, you're weird, and to be making the jokes about how weird Lynch is and all this. But in really examining it, I think that Lynch is known as being extremely weird. Of course, he appreciates the avant-garde and the surreal moments, but I think a lot of that comes from when he gets real. Like the extremity of something like Blue Velvet with a character like Frank Booth or something, where I was examining this with somebody recently. It seems like you want to call that a strange character, but is that just real? I mean, that's how somebody that's a complete sociopath actually is, and that's part of what scares us and throws us off, that we're not used to seeing such realism in the characters that are flawed human beings.
Right, and I mean, going back to Twin Peaks in particular as a TV show, any number of people have pointed out or said to me in conversation or whatever, something about the dialogue and that being weird. And I think that on the one hand, all right, maybe it does feel weird, but it ties in with this way in which I think Lynch likes to play with this line between sort of the hyper realistic and the absurd, right? Like there's a sort of space that he likes to sort of inhabit where something is, on the one hand, maybe so realistic, right? Maybe it's almost that realism that starts making it feel absurd because you're not used to seeing something that's that realistic on the screen. If I'm making sense here, I don't know. I think of, if you recall the one scene in Eraserhead where she's like pulling her luggage from underneath the bed. And there's this weird look on her face, right?
Totally.
And it's totally like creepy and weird. But then at the same time, I can't help but think like, yeah, you might look like that as you're struggling to pull something out from under the bed, right? And with the dialogue and with these characters, right? I think part of it is we're just not used to seeing this. We're used to seeing TV shows where people talk in a way that no one actually talks, right? Like,
Correct. Yeah.
Like Aaron Sorkin is sort of paradigmatic
Right.
of this, right? Like no one talks like that, or at least you wouldn't have a world where everyone is like that witty, right? And with other things too on TV.
It's funny to see the opposite reaction of that. It's like it circles full back around because we don't necessarily want to see people talking how they really talk in real life either. It's either completely fake or it's too real, and so it feels fake because we're used to watching the fake and taking that as our real television world.
Right. This is sort of where I was going. I think that there's this kind of fake realism, if we want to call it that, that's created by a certain kind of way of doing things that's become sort of standardized, right? So that since your run-of-the-mill TV show will largely resemble all of your other run-of-the-mill TV shows, right? In terms of the way people talk or the sort of tropes they're playing with or, these sort of stereotypical character roles. One of the things I love about Twin Peaks is it plays with all of that, right? So, okay, yes, Laura Palmer is your, teenage girl prom queen who, is also using drugs and sexually active, and she gets murdered. But she's not the stereotype, right? And like none of these characters are. That I've always felt that the show plays with that, with these characters, right? Oh, this is your local cop, local sheriff, or whatever.
Yeah, and the realism that comes from their individuality and their uniqueness. And I think that in that sense, the question can be asked, is David Lynch actually a surrealist, or is he a realist and we're uncomfortable with
Right.
reality? And so we have this knee-jerk reaction to when we're shown something a little bit too real that says to us, oh, that's weird, that's strange. But at the same time, you mentioned Eraserhead earlier. It also comes to mind is the scene where they're all eating the small chickens or Cornish
Right.
hens or whatever they are.
Right.
And he's like, oh, look, see the size of this chicken, strangest damn thing. And I think that becomes one of those quotable lines of like, oh, what a weird movie. But we've probably all heard one of our own uncles say something like that was just like, okay, we get it,
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, it's, again, peeling the illusory element off of it, which again is like zooming into the grass in Blue Velvet or something, where there's the quaint forefront-facing element that when he peels it off, you see something that you're actually uncomfortable with underneath that says, if we drop our personas and we really see who we really are, that we're going to be uncomfortable. We're not going to be prepared to do that.
I mean, of course, there are elements that definitely owe something to surrealism, right? So we don't want to ignore that either,
Of course,
right?
I'm examining it from the characters and how he writes dialogue
Yeah,
for characters is
right,
really what I'm focusing on. Because visually and the sound design, completely, does have these surreal and avant-garde elements that I think he intentionally goes for, which is where a lot of the mystery comes in, trying to figure out what's going on. But I like examining, like, where does this quirkiness come from? And from movie to movie, you see the kind of same characters that are a little too friendly or are saying the awkward thing or, aren't so sharp. Maybe sometimes it's their level of awareness. And you say, oh, there's a David Lynch character. And what it really defines what a David Lynch character is, if anything.
Right, and I think there's a link between how these characters come across and other aspects of the filmmaking. So, for example, he has a way of not cutting where other directors would cut. Right, the shot will linger just a bit longer. Right, and it again, I think that it just serves to disrupt our expectations about what a TV show is like or whatever, right? Or what a character on a TV show is like, to pull it back there. We're not sort of fitting the standard types that you might expect here with the characters. So they come across as quirky, but also real, and you start feeling like you know them.
Right.
And you see one of them on some other TV show, and you don't think of the actor's name. You say, oh, look, Major Briggs is on this TV show,
exactly,
or whatever, right? Like, it's a weird thing.
I watched all of the original series, and then right after that I went through and I watched all of Tales from the Crypt, the HBO series. And it was striking how many actors from Twin Peaks were then, on the Tales from the Crypt. But to see them decontextualized to me exactly, where you'd say, oh, there's Leland. You wouldn't say Ray Wise, So, and I think this is a good point. Let's go through the characters. Just before we can kind of go through them, one thing I would like to do is kind of, let's have a joyous moment just talking and shouting out the characters we love. But I think it'd be pertinent to discuss where did we leave these characters off 25 years ago, to kind of maybe go through a list and say, where have they been and what was the last thing we saw them doing? Because that would help to build up, like, okay, as we're moving forward in the return. But before we get to that, I would like to ask you, do you have like a favorite character? Is there anybody that you would, if you're going to get a Twin Peaks character tattooed or something?
I mean, it's one of those questions where it seems to me like if someone asks who your favorite character on Twin Peaks is, your answer almost has to be Dale Cooper, doesn't it?
Right.
I mean, it's kind of, so, but given that, so let's bracket that. All right. So let's all recognize the right answer is Agent Cooper.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then to reframe your question, it would be, who's your favorite character besides Agent Cooper? Because, of course, he's your favorite character.
Yes. Yeah. I got it.
Do you have an answer?
Totally agree. Honestly, I asked that question just to kind of break the ice, but
yeah.
I can't pick anybody specifically. I think what you just responded with is the best thing.
Yeah.
There's so many really fascinating characters that I love. Some characters I think are perfect because of that's the perfect thing for that role in the story, like Hawk or somebody like that. But then there's characters that I love because they're so complex, even if they weren't part of the original original mystery of Laura Palmer's murder, you have somebody like Wyndham Earle, who's very complex and intriguing character that comes from out of nowhere. Yeah, I think there's an incredible. The list is huge, right? There's dozens of characters in this small town, and I think another cool thing about it is the idea that you can be in the smallest town around, and you'll still find like a whole plethora of very intriguing people, which actually I think is a true thing in real life too. Once you get in, and you see somebody's life and how complex they are, not just a base character that is limited, but pick up all the details and all the nuances of a character.
All right, yeah, I mean I agree. So, unanswerable question.
Audrey Horne, by the way, is my answer. Sorry.
Oh, you got it, Audrey? Well, I mean, that's a respectable answer. It's easier to answer for me if you flip it around, right? Like who's the worst?
Yeah. Okay.
James?
Oh, you're asking me? James?
I mean,
well, there's a couple.
No offense to James Marshall, right?
Right.
I see what they're up to there, but the whole thing in the second season.
James has always been cool. So.
Yeah, James has always. Well, yeah, he's always been cool with his motorcycle.
There's a couple characters too that I can think of. Was it Richard Tremaine? Right. I will laugh at him, and I think that's great. But when you consider in the long scope compared to other characters, is that as strong?
I did love Dick Tremaine.
Yeah.
I'll be on record.
Yeah.
I thought he was hilarious. The wine tasting that he did.
Yeah, he gets a broken nose, and
he doesn't get a broken nose. The little pine weasel bites his nose.
Oh, that's right.
And then he's got the bandage, and he cracked me up.
About 15 years after watching the show, the original series, I walked into a dentist office and I saw him in a picture where he was demonstrating how nice his teeth were.
Yeah.
That he was actually a hired actor to do a photo shoot of his teeth.
He does have nice teeth.
Yeah. The guy's got great teeth.
Yeah.
But I just mean in the sense that he's one of those characters to me that's perfect for the time and place that he's there to do his thing. But like you say, in comparison to some of the other main characters.
Right. And there are a number of characters that seem to be, they're fairly minor. They pop up in the original run. You've got the mayor of Twin Peaks, for example, right? It's just sort of old and doddering, right? And his feud with his brother, Dougie. Which we're going to talk about Dougie here.
Yeah, Dougie becomes much more important, yep.
Talk about Dougie's, he becomes more important. But like the mayor and the whole thing with Lana. But again, I think even with these minor characters, some people get really down on the second season. I love it. But I think part of that is I love even this stuff, right?
Yeah.
Because even this stuff with the mayor and his brother, and I mean, these things that seem really, okay, in fairness, they're not very related to the central mystery, right? At least they don't seem to be. But all of that's enjoyable, right? So...
But you were singling out James earlier. What about the aside where James leaves Twin Peaks and he goes and finds Harbor with the woman and her scam that's going on?
That was why I said James. I was trying to mention that, right?
Yeah.
That whole storyline where James leaves town.
Yeah.
And then there's this whole plot not connected to anything else about him. First he's supposed to fix a car, and then they're going to like frame him for murder.
Right.
You're right. It's like, you can just skip all of that.
Yeah, and what is that doing to add to the character of James himself? What does what does that aside allow him to bring back to Twin Peaks and to Big Ed? It doesn't...
Yeah, I mean, the best I could do there is I think I kind of know what they were going for, right? Because if you recall, all throughout the series prior to that, every time we saw James, it was James and Donna, and the dialogue went like this. I don't know. Ever since Laura died, I just blah, 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 right?
Yeah.
So, not knocking it necessarily, but it seems to me what they were trying to do is to say, okay, now you're going to have this moment where James is going to like leave town to find himself or something like this, right? As some movement to like get over Laura's death finally or something like that. And just of all the things that they did, it doesn't feel like it worked. Do you agree?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a fair assumption. So that also brings me to, as we're kind of setting the foundations here, I mean, one of the main purposes of us going through all of this now is because we really want to dig deep in analysis of The Return.
Right.
The Return is completely blowing my mind right now. I think it's the best thing that's being made. And as we said earlier, there's no spoilers. We're not going to talk much about it during this episode. But we thought it would be good to go through a lot of the old stuff, go through Fire Walk with Me and just kind of discuss and catch us up so that by the next podcast we make, we can really dive deep and really start talking about some of the amazing things that are happening in The Return.
Right.
Part of that is an idea that I think is part of that is examining where we left off with some of these characters that we know about. So I think it'd be good to kind of go through them. And I know you've seen the original series more recently than I have. So some of these are posed, but some of these are authentic questions that I have.
Fair enough.
So where did we leave? There's a couple of famous families that have founded Twin Peaks. And there's a couple of institutions that are kind of the backbone of Twin Peaks. I would kind of point to the sheriff's office and everybody associated with that. We have Hawk. We have Sheriff Truman. We have Lucy, we have Andy. So let's start there. What's going on? Where did we leave these characters when we left them at the end of season 2?
So let's run through them. Let's start with Lucy and Andy, I guess.
Sure, that's a good place. Yes.
So, right, you've had this running thing about their relationship. You recall Lucy's pregnant. Mm-hmm. We were talking about Dick Tremaine. The whole controversy there is who's the father of Lucy's baby. And the whole thing where Andy was worried that he was sterile and so on, right? But now he's found out he's a whole damn crew or whatever.
Yeah.
And so by the time we get to the last episode, they've pretty much fully reconciled and they're good, right? Basically.
Moving forward, I remember thinking, okay, they're going to have a family and they're going to bring somebody else into the world.
Right, and they basically have decided that Andy's going to be the father. Biology be damned, right? There's
exactly.
We don't really care. We're not going to go on Maury Povich or whatever,
right?
And we're going to have this relationship. Andy's going to, be the father of this child. Screw Dick Tremaine.
Yeah,
and
they work so much better together. The two of them are two magnets that the polarization works. That they're just connected and attracted.
And what Lucy and Andy, I always thought they do seem like maybe they're not the sharpest tools in the shed.
Sure.
Throughout, and then they are played for comic relief often.
Sure, that's fair to say, but they also do come through with these very important key moments of solving the mystery too, where like Andy discovering or realizing that the image they were looking at was a map, a local area map, or finding, what does he find when he hits himself in the face with a wood plank?
He
finds
finds
the gloves,
Leo's boots,
the boots,
and
right.
some cocaine. No, that's what I was going to say. There are these moments where Lucy and Andy do come through, right? Like they're not idiots,
right?
They're kind of idiots, right? But they're not morons, or whatever.
Okay, so that's Lucy and Andy, who are in some ways the backbone of the sheriff's office and get some of the major work done there. What about Truman? Where do we leave Truman?
Well, so Truman, if you recall, in the season 2 finale, he goes to Glastonbury Grove, right? And basically witnesses Cooper disappearing or entering the lodge, or whatever language you want to use, right? You see the sort of curtains appear with behind the sycamore trees, and then Truman spent that night basically staking out that spot, right? Not knowing if or when Cooper was going to reappear. He seemed stressed out about it and so on, right? I don't know if we should also mention here the backstory with Josie, right?
I was going to say, so he's just gone through losing the love of his life and realizing that he was kind of lied to and conned in some ways.
Yeah,
and
I guess.
That led him into this kind of alcoholic thing where he's like in a low point.
Yeah, but by this point he's kind of come out of that, right? So he stakes out the grove and then is there when ultimately Cooper, or Cooper's doppelganger,
right,
reappears with Annie. And then the last we see him really is in the very last scene, back in Cooper's hotel room, when Cooper wakes up, Sheriff Truman's there, and right, if you recall, Cooper wakes up and says he needs to brush his teeth, and he asks, "How's Annie?" Right. And then he goes into the bathroom, and that's when he squeezes the toothpaste out all over the place, and then hits his head against the mirror, and we see Bob in the mirror, and roll credits.
Yeah,
that's the end of Twin Peaks.
Yeah,
everybody, right?
Yeah, exactly. That was traumatic and unexpected.
So
this character that you've grown to love and that you're really passionate about what happens to him. Yeah, he's okay now, but by the way, he's now
yeah,
completely corrupt, possibly irredeemably evil.
yeah. In the and then in the missing pieces,
Mm-hmm.
which is, if anyone doesn't know, basically deleted footage from Fire Walk with Me. In those missing pieces, one of them gives a little bit more of that scene. I kind of understand why they cut it. So is this canon or not? I guess it is. But you have then Cooper telling Harry that he fell into the mirror and thought it was funny. So I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But that's basically where we leave off with Sheriff Truman in the original run.
And similarly, Hawk.
Yeah.
So these are kind of more or less, I wouldn't say flat characters, but stable characters who are more or less going to be the same when we return.
Hawk's pretty stable, and Hawk never really got storylines outside of the police work,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I love Hawk,
Mm-hmm.
but didn't have maybe a huge arc. He was just kind of always there
Mm-hmm.
and reliable, and he's Hawk,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so he's involved with all of that at the end. Of course, Hawk is full-blooded Nez Perce,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, but one of the things on that note, not to get too sidetracked into this, but that you do have here in Twin Peaks, Lynch casting, and you have this character who is a Native American,
Mm-hmm.
right? But he's not played as some stereotype of a Native American at all, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hawk is just a guy, a person, a human being who happens to have this heritage,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, and it does, it comes up here and there where Hawk tells Cooper about, legends pertaining to the White and Black Lodge
Right.
and things like that. But it's all done very tastefully,
Mm-hmm.
I think. And
you also have Hawk as a great tracker. There's a moment where Coop says to him, if I'm ever lost, I hope you're the man that comes to find me,
right.
which may or may not be relevant.
Oh, yeah.
And we also, from Secret History, find out that Hawk's, through his family lineage, his father is working for the timber industry and working for the mill, doing the most dangerous job in the world, which is free climbing these giant trees and trimming the tops, doing the tree topping. And so in his family, he's not only connected to the region culturally through his heritage, but he's connected to the region's industry through his family. Moving along, we have other really important families and institutions in Twin Peaks, one of which is the Packards.
And the Packard sawmill.
So the Packard sawmill. So we also have Andrew Packard, and we have Catherine.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, that brings in Pete and the Martells.
Yeah, Pete Martell.
Which Secret History goes into the backstory of their families.
Their whole Capulet and Montague thing.
Yeah, exactly,
right?
where there were feuding families in the timber industry. And then when Catherine and Pete get together at a very young age, there's a huge attraction, right, it's said. And they're like the Romeo and Juliet story. They get together, but very soon after that, they kind of fall into the characters that we learn them to be when we're tuning in, where Pete Martell is kind of the Martells have diminished in their power, and the Packards have only increased in power in what they own around Twin Peaks. And Catherine kind of plays more of a business shark, where Pete kind of becomes a little bit more timid and a little bit more quirky, right?
Well, maybe he was always timid and quirky. I don't know. Pete's sweet.
Mm-hmm.
And R.I.P. Jack Nance,
Yeah.
amongst others, right?
Yeah.
So you have that whole setup, right? Catherine, Pete, Andrew, and Josie.
Josie.
Throw on Josie
Mm-hmm.
in there, right? So, hopefully you've seen the original series. This is all kind of rather convoluted,
Mm-hmm.
the plot line here. It's actually one of the big plot lines that runs through the series, if you think about it.
And then Thomas Eckart's role in all of that.
Yeah,
too.
with the whole thing with Thomas Eckert and so on. And the relation, Ben Horn is involved here, right? Because there's a whole thing where, the Horns want the property and they want to develop this Ghostwood Estates or whatever It is the Horns who are responsible for burning down the sawmill in the end of season 1, right? They also convoluted. They hire Leo to burn down the mill, and they hire Hank to kill Leo, right? And they want to pin this on Catherine. All right, so things...
And then, of course, later Josie is hiring Hank to kill Andrew in the explosion. Right. So there's a couple of crossovers with Hank in there.
Yeah, Hank is not a good guy for the most part, right? All right, let's focus. Focusing on the Packards. So I don't think that we here need to go through all the details of all of that convoluted plot. I was kind of mentioning it to maybe push it aside a little bit because it is really rather complicated. It's not clear how relevant a lot of that's going to be moving forward in the return.
But to catch us up, we do know, as of the last episode of season 2, that Pete and Andrew have died in the explosion at the bank.
Correct.
And then that actually leaves only Catherine left as the heir to this whole timber industry family that's gone back 100 years in Twin Peaks. Right.
So if people recall what happened in that last episode at the bank with regard to Pete and Andrew, now that we know Andrew's alive, again, all this convoluted soap opera backstory, right?
Yes, right.
But Pete and Andrew, they're chums again, right? And if you remember, the setup for this is they'd gotten a box from Thomas. Was it Thomas
Eckhart? Yeah, a box within a box.
Is his name Thomas? Okay. I want to say Meister Eckhart for some reason. Anyway, they get this box, and it's like a puzzle box, right? And they finally end up getting the box open. And in the box is a safety deposit key.
Right.
And Catherine is aware of this as well, right? And at first they agree, they're not going to do anything. They're going to think about it. They put it in plain sight on the kitchen table or something like this. But Andrew's sneaky, and he switches the key out. And Pete
sees him do that.
Pete sees him do that, right? So then they're off to the bank to open the safety deposit box.
Right.
Are they stupid? Maybe. And so when they get to the bank and they open the safety deposit box, boom. Right? It was a trick.
Do we know what they're expecting? Because they're still trying to one-up Eckhart. There's still this ongoing battle between Thomas Eckhart and them. So do we know what they are expecting when they go in there, or they just think it's riches? Quote-unquote riches,
Yeah, I don't think that they really have any idea. It seems more like their curiosity or whatever is leading them to do this. And to anyone listening, if I'm wrong, if I'm forgetting something, I apologize, right? Because all the ins and outs and the details of how Eckhart figures in and all of that, I will admit to a little fuzziness about, right? But regardless, it does blow up, and we do know we get confirmation in the secret history that Pete and Andrew are dead, right? Which is awfully convenient from the perspective of the return, because the actors who play those characters are also dead.
That we've also lost, yeah, exactly.
So,
but the other thing that's confirmed in Secret History is that the third party involved in that scene did not die. It was Audrey Horne, which brings us to the Horns. So Audrey did not die. It's also said in the Secret History that there was evidence that showed that Pete jumped on top of her to save her life, and that because she was standing in front of the bank vault door that she was handcuffed to, that might have somewhat shielded the blast from her. So we know that that she did not die. Any more than that, we're not going to talk about, because that's some stuff that's revealed in the new one.
And it's plausible that she didn't die.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, if you remember that last episode, right? I mean, of course, the thing that sticks in your mind is the very last scene. And how's Annie?
Yeah.
Right? How's Annie? But over the course of that episode, Audrey might be dead. Ben might be dead. Pete might be dead. Right? Everyone's put into peril. Right? And I mean, of course, Pete and Andrew are dead. It would have been hard for them to survive regardless. But, TV's TV. But still, they're right there in the explosion. I think it's much more plausible. Audrey has chained herself to the bank vault. She's a little further away. So, okay, Audrey has survived. it's confirmed.
Yeah. But that, like I said, does bring us to the Horns. So Audrey was there, actually, in a statement against her father, Ben Horn, going in to develop Ghostwood, right?
So says...
Mhm.
The secret history says something like this, right? But in the show, it's less clear because at that point, Ben Horn was trying to be good, right? He started eating carrots instead of smoking cigars. And he started this whole Save the Pine Weasel campaign, which I always found very entertaining, where he was trying to stop Ghostwood because at that point it was going to be Catherine's deal. Right. So in the show itself, it seems like Audrey is going to the bank and is on Ben's side in terms of trying to stop Ghostwood because she's found out the bank is funding the project.
Right.
But I know you've been reading The Secret History, and this is one of the things where there seems to be a little inconsistency. The account you get in The Secret History seems to suggest that Ben and Audrey were more at odds at this point. So what do we do with this inconsistency? I'm not sure.
Well, it's also an inconsistency that could totally exist within the narrative where Audrey is, cuddling up to her father and saying, Daddy, I want to take over the business and I want to be responsible again. But meanwhile, maybe she has discovered something that we haven't exactly seen, the same thing that she's seen that causes her to then do this.
Well, one thing that we know that she's seen, that we have seen, is that Ben Horn owns One-Eyed Jacks.
Right.
And kind of want to have sex with her. Right? If you remember that scene, right? He doesn't know it's his daughter.
Doesn't know it's her, yes.
But, I mean, does he know it's like a 17-year-old girl? Yeah. Right? And so, once you get pulling on the secret history a little bit here, but it seems like the story we're getting is that, okay, Pete and Andrew died in the bank. Catherine then, we're more or less told in the book, right? Just sort of recedes.
Yeah,
right?
She becomes a recluse. She sells out actually to Ben Horn, the last of her holdings.
Right, so she sells out to Ben Horn, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, Ben's evil again, right? Like, I think that's the move. Just pulling from these things, right, in the show, right? Because the other thing, what happens with Ben Horn in the season 2 finale?
Well, last time we see him is in the company of the Haywards.
Yeah, right. Why?
Yeah.
You recall?
Well, this is because he's going in and he's trying to get honest in this moment, and he's trying to tell them that, he's really Donna's father.
Right.
But, of course, Doc Hayward comes in this moment, and he realizes, you're ruining my family with this honesty, which is this moment of, terrible honesty that's going to wreck lives.
Exactly.
And, of course, we see Donna freaking out saying, well, who are my parents? And she's having this similar parallel to Laura Palmer, where she's, re-examining not only who she is, but that her parents weren't exactly the same thing that she thought that they were.
Right. Well, if you recall, what actually happens is, in that last scene, Donna hugs Doc Hayward and says, "You're my daddy. You're my daddy."
Yeah.
Right. Like,
she's decided either way. Yeah.
Which interesting parallel maybe with the Andy stuff, right? There are certainly themes here about parenthood, fatherhood, motherhood, right?
Yep. And this is also where we see Doc react to that, Doc Hayward reacting to that. And, of course, Doc Hayward has always been such a wholesome figure that's been pretty much one of the most responsible people in Twin Peaks.
Absolutely.
And we see him in this moment where he loses his cool and he attacks Ben Horn, shoves him against a wall. We see a bloodied Ben Horn on the ground. And correct me if I'm wrong, that's the last thing we see of Ben Horn.
That's the last thing we see of Ben Horn, right. So exactly. So to tie this back all together, okay, so Ben Horn had a head injury. Now he's evil again, right? Like, I think it kind of works, putting it all together, right? So Ben's not dead, and it doesn't have to be necessarily one of those things where we're directly linking it to the head injury, although there is that kind of trope with Nadine and stuff already.
Sure.
But regardless, right, Ben's attempt to be good leads him here, right? To be good is to be truthful. I think maybe we think that. A lot of people think that, right? But in in Ben attempting to move towards sort of living in the truth, well, what does he end up doing? He ends up causing misery, potentially wrecking 2 families, and at least a concussion for his trouble,
At
right?
least, yeah.
So,
Exactly.
I mean...
and also making... There's that moment that's implied maybe Doc Hayward went too far and possibly has just killed him. So if that's at the end of what we're... If that was the last thing that I saw,
right,
and I kind of had that thought in my head, like, oh my gosh, did he just kill Ben Horn?
Right.
You know, and coming from being the most responsible, the doctor in town, who comes from a lineage of other doctors, who is the local responsible healer, to then cause damage to somebody, you know, that was a pretty intense moment.
It is true. And we were talking about duality of the characters, right? It's sort of even Doc Hayward, right, has this moment where he kind of loses his cool and gets a little violent, right? And
just seeing him with his fists in the air screaming in that last moment, that's the last we see of Doc Hayward too, so it's very quite an impression.
So you're absolutely right? I mean, really up until The Secret History was released, at least, you might have thought maybe Ben was dead there, right? I mean, no, exciting times. Get some answers about some of these questions that some of us have been living with for, 25 years.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And then even over the last year, seeing the credits list announced and who's going to be in the cast, and it's been a very exciting year of speculation and wondering. So just to finish up with the horns, we also have Jerry Horn. What's the last thing we see of Jerry Horn? Do you know?
Oh, Jerry Horn. I remember him eating his pig.
Well, yeah, Jerry Horn is also one of those characters in the show that isn't really attached to anybody else. He's
other than
even
Ben.
The horns, he's barely attached, and they have this very unique relationship.
He's in and out.
He's in and out. Yep.
His whole paradigmatic of his whole character is the first time we see him, where he comes in with those sandwiches.
Oh, the sandwiches, yeah.
Right, and they're eating dinner.
Yeah.
Right. We should remember they're eating dinner.
He interrupts
and
their
Jerry
family meal.
Comes in, interrupts the family dinner. He's like, Ben, you got to try this sandwich, right? So he was always an entertaining character to me. I don't remember exactly when the last time was we saw him, though. When we have Johnny Horn.
Well, okay, there's Johnny Horn.
Just let's remember that he exists.
That he existed. Johnny Horn is an interesting character because he is relatable to the narrative arc story of Ben Horn, but also to Audrey, and is also the reason Audrey has kind of like this profound respect for Laura that we see, because Laura was taking care of Johnny Horn. And we also see that Dr. Jacoby was treating Johnny as well, right?
Right. So we're never exactly told what's up with Johnny, right? Clearly he seems slow, if it's PC enough to use that term now. I mean, undiagnosed slowness, as far as I can tell, right? So something's amiss there. But we're never really quite told whether it's a genetic issue or, brain trauma or more psychological in nature. I mean, of course, given that Jacoby's treating him, we might think that maybe there is a more psychological diagnosis here. But I'm not sure we really know.
And so that might lead us to continue through the Haywards. So, of course, Donna... That's also her, asking about who are my parents is the last time we see her as well.
Right.
So basically, when we leave the Haywards, they're an extreme moment of stress. And of course, there's, 3 daughters in the Hayward family?
Yeah, there are 3 daughters.
Okay, well, speaking of that, can we just take a second and run through the Hayward daughters? There's that incredible scene where one of them is playing piano and the other one is reading a poem about Laura Palmer.
Right, this dinner scene in I think it's the first episode of season 2, where Harriet, the middle daughter, she's the one who has this poem written about Laura, right? And, it was Laura, right? I mean, people might want to go back to that poem. I don't know. And then the younger daughter is named Gersten. She's the one who plays piano, and you have that scene where Leland sings Get Happy and everything. People probably remember this, right? Yeah. And that episode actually ends with her playing piano when the credits roll, right?
Right.
Which is one of the only episodes where you don't get a still frame with the closing credits. You have her playing piano, which this actress, Alicia Witt, you know who she is. I mean, people will recognize her right? I don't know if people realize or have made this connection to themselves that was her in Twin Peaks.
Do we know if she's in the list of
actually she's on the cast list
for
the returns, so I guess we might see Kirsten Hayward.
Picture it from Donna's perspective, where she's just seen her best friend, of course, go through this very traumatic time and then end up murdered. And then all the coping time that we saw her with James and possibly trying to fit into some new shoes after having tried to fit into Laura's shoes.
Right.
And then now some real family trauma actually hitting her at home, whereas previously we kind of saw Donna as wanting to get a more exciting life and considering Laura's life a little bit more exciting than her own.
Right. So yeah, that whole scene in the, I think it's the first episode of season 2, where Donna, she tries on Laura's sunglasses. You remember this? She goes to see James in prison and she's wearing Laura's sunglasses, and all of a sudden she's all sultry.
She's smoking.
And she's smoking. I smoke sometimes.
Yeah. She has that cool phrase, "got a light," that she says.
Yeah, she does say "got a light," doesn't she? Yeah.
And
that's a weird, I know we're going to talk about Fire Walk with Me here in a minute, but there's also that scene there where Laura doesn't want Donna to wear her stuff.
Yeah.
You remember that, right?
Yeah. Or even before Laura goes out that night when they're at her home and she's basically relating that concept to Laura, saying, "Oh, Laura, you've got a better life than I do," kind of scenario.
Yeah, because Donna doesn't think her life is as exciting, I guess, is what you're after, yeah.
And her attraction to James there, where she wants somebody like James that's wholesome and cute, and and Laura's like, you don't understand the dynamic.
James is sweet, but he's so dumb.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
And then also, for the rest of the Haywards, it goes the same. That's the last moment we see them in. We see them in an extreme moment of stress, and we don't know how they're going to come out on top of this.
Yeah, we don't really know anything more there, I don't think.
Definitely a cliffhanger with them that I was very excited leading up to the return to see, okay, where are the Haywards today?
And of course, side note, Doc Hayward, Warren Frost, is the actor who plays Doc Hayward, which is Mark Frost's father, if anyone doesn't know.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
I did not know that. So that's where the Haywards are left off.
Oh, and you mentioned Grace Zabriskie, who plays Laura's mother, Sarah Palmer.
Yeah.
Right.
So think
daughter's
of
been
her.
murdered.
Yeah.
Whose husband did it.
Yeah.
Right, and then of course Leland dies. Yeah. Right, in that scene in the prison. And Sarah Palmer is just left with all that grief and suffering. And we don't really see her much after that. Yeah. In the original run.
That's a real heartbreaker to consider her position. Because also, besides the grief and heartache of others, there's her, I guess what I would say is her level of guilt, maybe, questioning her own involvement for allowing herself to have blinders on to the abuse kind of thing. Granted, she was being drugged, and there was a lot of things that are involved with that.
Well, and of course, we should also note here, right, she sees the white horse in her living room, and she sees the face of Bob.
Correct.
Right. So there's the one scene with Mike, the one-armed man, where he says that the only people who can see Bob's true face are the gifted and the damned. Well, Sarah Palmer wasn't killed by Leland, Bob, at least. So I guess she's gifted. So that is maybe worth noting that Sarah Palmer is a character who has that kind of intuitive faculty, or whatever we want to call it, that she can potentially get visions or whatever, right?
Yeah, so
poor Sarah.
Okay, and another very important character, the log lady, right? Margaret Lanterman.
Margaret Lanterman, yeah.
Very important to the whole show, and also the man versus nature concept. So Margaret is known locally as the log lady because she carries this log around that she speaks to.
Right.
So where do we leave Margaret Lanterman off? And what's the significance of her speaking with her log?
Well, I think the last time we see her in that last episode is in the sheriff's station because Pete thinks that she's stolen his truck. You remember that?
Right.
But it wasn't her. It was Wyndham Earle dressed up as her.
Yeah.
Doesn't look like it. Terrible costume. But, I guess he also messed with the lights at this Twin Peaks contest. So it was dark, so maybe okay.
Right.
You'd mistake him for our friend.
Yeah, not many other women running around town holding a log. So
yeah, okay, so I guess that works. But so yeah, the backstory here is interesting. She carries this log around right throughout the series. She'll at times tell people, "My log has a message for you," right? If you remember, I think it might be the first time Cooper runs into her. She insists that he ask the log.
Right.
And
which implies she's kind of the translator, the middle person. The thought is not actually coming from her as a disoriented crazy lady, but the thought is actually coming from the wood she's holding.
Right, and there's this stuff with her husband that, right, he died in this fire and so on.
Right, that comes out in Secret History on their wedding day, actually, right?
But I think it's, I think, okay. But I think it's mentioned in the show even. But yeah, you get a little more detail there in the Secret History for sure. When she shows up at the sheriff's station in the last episode, she's got a jar of like the oil from the
scorched
grove.
engine oil.
Or at least, yeah, it's what smells like scorched engine oil, right? I guess, is it oil?
Right.
Whatever. But Cooper asks her, and she says that her husband brought that home, like right before he died, and said, this is an opening to a gateway, right? And that is, I guess, part of what's like keying Cooper in terms of, finding the opening to the lodge and everything in that last episode. There's also something there where Cooper seems to have some, weird intuition, right? Like Pete says, the log lady stole my truck, and Cooper responds, the log lady did not steal your truck. The log lady will be here in 1 minute. Right. So how is he keyed into something? How does he know that? Right. But there's something going on there. And it certainly seems that the log lady is not just some, quirky, crazy local, but that there's something metaphysical with that wood. Right.
Right. And we see at Glastonbury Grove that there is oil right in the center of the circle of sycamore trees.
Right.
And then that jar of oil, I believe Hawk brings in Ronette Pulaski, and Cooper shows her the jar. She smells it, and she kind of freaks out in fear a little bit.
Right. She freaks out. And, I mean, of course she does. This is kind of mean to her, actually, if you think about it. She is traumatized. And then, but I guess they're checking, right? Like, is this the smell? Have you smelled this before? And she says, yeah, she smelled it when Laura was murdered.
Right.
Right. So,
which links all of that together with the lodge.
And the murder of Jacques Renault and all of that.
Right, because Dr. Jacoby was there in the hospital and also smelled the same smell.
Right, exactly.
During that death.
Exactly. So when we're talking about the log, well, in particular the log, right, and the fact that it does kind of seem like Margaret's husband is in the log. Right, that's what we're led to think.
That's kind of what I was thinking. Yeah,
and so then maybe we should talk about also another figure, another character who ultimately seems to be trapped in wood, which is Josie. Right, that last scene with Josie, it seems like she almost dies of fear or something.
Right.
Bob shows up to Cooper and says, what happened to Josie, Cooper? Right? And then we see her face like in the knob of the wood in the hotel room in the Great Northern.
Which also might be significant that in this example of sentience being inside the wood, it is post-manufactured stripped wood, polished and presented as a product, versus Margaret Lanterman's log, which is still in its natural state.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. But then there also seems to be some possibility that she's not just in that drawer knob. She might be in like the wood of the hotel more generally, because you have these scenes where Pete's walking around the Great Northern. He's got that really cheesy poem about Josie, and
that's hilarious. Yeah,
it's like, I think I will never see a face as lovely as Josie,
right,
or whatever.
Right.
And some other little indications of the possibility that people might be somehow sensing Josie's presence in the Great Northern.
I see, like she's trapped in the wood of the Great Northern, or like her spirit is trapped in a sense inside the wood.
Yeah. So apparently that's something that can happen to you in the Twin Peaks universe.
Right. And Josie is also one of the figures that's an industrialist involved in logging in town through her marriage to Andrew Packard.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So it could be significant, of this man versus nature ideal, where it seems all the characters that have moved to Twin Peaks to establish the destruction of the natural environment for their own profit, that has always come with a curse, right? Okay, so continuing down the list of characters, I'm curious about kind of the question being, where did they leave off? We also have, that we haven't addressed yet, is the whole scenario with Nadine, Big Ed, Norma, and Hank, and the connections there to Big Ed's gas station and the Double R Diner, which are, Twin Peaks institutions. I love the fact that they are just a diner and a gas station,
right.
But at the same time, they're very they're institutions in Twin Peaks that the locals are very proud of. The damn fine coffee and cherry pie, and Ed being a master mechanic and such. And even seeing James pump gas at Big Ed's gas station.
Yeah.
So where do we leave off in this whole scenario? We see that Big Ed and Nadine, if memory serves, Nadine went through the whole thing where she lost her memory. She thought she was regressed into being a high school student.
Yeah, and got super strength.
Strength.
I mean,
yes,
wherever that came from.
Right.
But she did.
And so maybe because of that, or in lieu of that, Mike falls in love with her. High school Mike falls in love with her, and they start a relationship. That somehow works for Mike, knowing, okay, she's not exactly a high schooler, but she thinks she is.
You get a little bit of Mike sort of winking that the sex is really good.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? I mean, I think to Bobby, right? It's like, this is weird. You're dating this older woman. And he's like, well, man.
Yeah. And at this point too, he's 17, 18, maybe, right? So there's that whole thing comes up again that we see, like with Ben Horn and Audrey, or just One-Eyed Jacks in general.
Right, that's true. But now with the gender roles flipped, so.
But Nadine, and the last time we see her and Mike is when she is getting her memory back, and she doesn't recognize Mike. She says, "Who are you? Why are you in my home?" But that is preceded just momentarily before by Big Ed wearing the nice suit and snapping his fingers and approaching Norma. And so he and Norma are finally getting their dream relationship that they've always kind of wished they had. But the whole idea that Big Ed wasn't willing to do that if it was going to bring Nadine suffering, right? So her losing her memory actually allowed him a little ability to say, okay, she won't suffer from us getting together. And go ahead, date a high school football player, and then we'll call it even, kind of thing.
Yeah, right? the whole plot line here is a bit weird, right?
Yeah.
But where we leave them, is basically, as you said, this is the one bit that's really like facilitated by head injury, right? Because well, actually, at first it wasn't really head injury, right? Nadine tried to kill herself. In the end of season 1, she took a bunch of pills. But okay, then she becomes this. She thinks she's in high school, right? She thinks she's a teenager. She has super strength for some reason. I think she has a crush on Mike first, is how it goes, right? But yeah, it does seem it is head injuries now at the end that's bringing Nadine back to herself. So it's really kind of a tragic ending. Yeah, because
at what happens? It's at Miss Twin Peaks where her and Mike both get head injuries.
Yeah, it's basically where the stuff falls at Miss Twin Peaks contest and hits him in the head, right? And
the lights go out, Annie is kidnapped.
So in that last scene, both Nadine and Mike have bandages around their heads, right? And
then once she gets her memory back, Mike is very quick to look to Ed in a very hilarious moment and say, Ed, I'm sorry, I think I let things get out of hand, or whatever he says.
Yeah, might have let things go too far, or something like that. Yeah. But that's where we leave them, and so it seems like, okay, well now Norma and Ed aren't going to get together, right? We kind of thought that their love was finally going to get to be real, right?
Right.
And apparently not. Now, Hank's not the issue at this point, right? Hank's in prison.
Yeah.
At this point. And if you don't recall, Hank got arrested during the drug bust. Same time when Jean Renault died, right?
Where Cooper shoots him.
Yeah, this whole thing, and then Denise Bryson was involved in this. David Duchovny's character who we might want to talk about here in a minute. But Hank gets arrested there because he's involved with this drug deal with the Renaults and everything, right? And he gets sent to prison. And Norma's done with him, right? So Hank's not in the way, right? For all of you who've been wondering for years how Hank ended up, it is in the secret history of Twin Peaks that he got killed in prison.
Yeah, there's actually an account written by Hawk that talks about the love story between Norma and Big Ed, and I think that's that really added a lot to me. One of the great things about secret history is it's it reinvigorates the whole stories. You get more of the backstories of the characters, and it adds to the mystery. And I think it's perfect timing to release something like that right before we get into the return. It's really great. We recommend it to anybody, of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and speaking of Denise, when was the last time we see Denise? Was it in a bust, the drug bust as well?
I believe so. Yeah, right. So I mean, that whole character arc, she shows up because Cooper's under investigation, right? And that whole drug bust is sort of the culmination of proving Coop's innocence and so on. At the place where they were dealing the drugs was called Dead Dog Farm, if you recall. That's maybe worth noting. And so they, Denise shows up a few times. She's at Dougie Milford's wedding, and so on. But I'm pretty sure the last time that we saw her, was in that episode with the drug bust, and where we also see Dennis, right? Because Denise decides that in order to go undercover for this drug deal, that it would be better for her to be male for that, right? But then when things go awry, ultimately, as Denise, she shows up as if she's delivering food,
right?
And like lifts up her,
exposes the leg,
the leg, and then there's the gun for Cooper to grab, right? So, it's people are excited. David Duchovny is on the cast list for the new run, at least, right? And maybe something worth thinking about or talking about that we did have here in the original Twin Peaks in the very early 90s, right? This example of a character who was trans, as we would say now, right? I mean, but again, that was just like an aspect of this person.
Yeah,
right?
It wasn't exploitative or designed for the comedy element or something like that for the sake of. It was part of the character written in.
Yeah, just
something that we hadn't really seen before on television, right?
Not that I can recall, right? I mean, particularly insofar as Denise is this example of someone who has transitioned or is transitioning, right? This isn't someone who cross-dresses for giggles or whatever, right? This is a character of Dennis Bryson who came to decide that he really was a woman, right? And I think that's striking, I mean, I don't know how well people recall or, certainly there might be people listening to this who weren't even born then, or who were little children or whatever. But things have really come a long way with regard to that kind of stuff. And, even the extent to which they avoid what I often call like 90s feminism or whatever is striking, right? By 90s feminism, I mean when the show in the 90s makes a point of letting you know that it's being like feministy, right? And there is some of that in Twin Peaks, right? With reference to Denise even. If you remember, Audrey expresses this like surprise that a woman could be a DEA agent. Right. This is what I mean by 90s feminism. That level of like, well, of course a woman could be a DEA. Yeah, okay. We get it. A little on the nose is all I mean. Good enough, fair enough. But to have something with the trans issue there that was actually subtler than that, it's cool. Yeah.
Okay. Keep going through the characters. What about Dr. Jacoby? When's the last thing we see with Dr. Jacoby?
Well, so Dr. Jacoby is, I mean, it seems more present in the first season than the second season, I think. Jacoby was Laura's therapist, right? He wears those glasses with the 2 different color lenses. I love this in Secret History. There's this bit about why he does that,
Yes.
right? Which is just kind of hilarious.
Yeah, we've acknowledged that we're going to have some things in that of the book in there, so we can talk about it.
Well, I don't know how much we need to go into it, but it was something just in terms of his character. It seems like this weird, quirky thing. Like, oh, it's this weird guy who really likes Hawaii, and so he wears these weird glasses, right? But then we get this explanation in the Secret History that he thinks that these dual-colored glasses can like aid in correcting psychological problems, right?
Yeah, the intuitive side of the brain versus the logical side of the brain, and if you correct for the colors of what your eyes are giving input to the brain always. Yeah, he's actually like an invention to him where he's saying, okay, if you want to suppress or strengthen the intuitive or logical side of your brain, then maybe try these glasses.
Right, and then doesn't it say something like it's a shame that Nadine lost an eye because she would have been an ideal candidate. Yeah.
There's full psychological evaluation of Nadine in that book where he says that it's a shame she would have been the perfect candidate for that.
Yeah, so we had Jacoby in the first season, right? He showed up and took Laura's heart necklace. He gets assaulted in the season 1 finale, and we never actually find out who did that. People seem to think Leland, I guess, but we never actually get told. That's unresolved. And he fades a bit, but after that, he's in the hospital, right? He tells Coop and Truman that he smelled scorched engine oil when Jacques Renault was being killed by Leland Bob, right?
Right.
So
that's the last time I remember seeing him.
Yeah, if he shows up after that, I don't recall either.
Okay, another big family in Twin Peaks lore is the Briggses.
You got Bobby, who was Laura's official boyfriend, right? Bobby seems like the bad boy, and James seems like the sweet one.
Yeah.
But Bobby was the official boyfriend, and James was the secret affair, right? And Bobby was the high school quarterback and blah, blah, blah. Of course, he was also dealing drugs. In Fire Walk With Me, he kills a guy in the woods. In terms of where he ends up, if you remember in season 2, he starts trying to get involved with Ben Horn. Like, he wants to go into business. We've had this whole thing with he and Shelley trying to defraud insurance.
Taking care of Leo.
Taking care of Leo.
Right.
But it turns out they're not actually getting as much money as they thought they were going to get, right? So Bobby's like, I need to go to work. And so he's trying to enter the world of business and become like Ben Horn's protege. And he does really seem to rather ingratiate himself there. He's present when Ben goes through his whole Civil War reenactment thing. He's there like playing the bugle or whatever. He can't actually play, so it's just like... And he's dressed up in, Civil War garb and everything.
Which incidentally, I think is one of the things in the show that show like how genius actually Dr. Jacoby is. Like, for all of his psychotropic stuff that comes out in the Secret History, he really is solid in helping these people out.
I know how to help Ben. He just needs to win the Civil War for the South.
Yeah.
It's easy.
Yeah, back to the Briggses.
Right, so Bobby. I've been trying to get in with Ben Horn. It seems like that's going fairly well. But this has also put him on the outs with Shelley a bit, right? It's created some tension there because, he and Shelley have basically been a couple throughout the show, even though, Shelley's married to Leo and everything, right? But, Leo tried to kill her. He was going to kill Bobby, I guess, right? So Leo got shot by Hank, right, at the end of season 1.
Right.
And then he's basically incapacitated for a bit, right? He's like apparently conscious, but can't really do anything. Just says things like new shoes, right? And Bobby and Shelley originally are going to take care of him at home in order to like defraud the insurance or whatever. But when Bobby goes and starts basically working for Ben Horn, he's kind of leaving this all on Shelley, right? And she has to quit her job at the Double R and spend all of her time caring for invalid Leo, who tried to kill her, right? He tied her up in the mill and set it on fire, right? He intended to kill her. Leo is not a good dude, right?
I like that dichotomy because he's always a threat, and yet it's such a horrible situation for her to be in. But there's always that threat that he's going to wake up and go back to his old evil self, but yet they're the ones exploiting him, though.
Yeah, right, exactly. But then he does, basically, kind of, right? He does wake up. He does kind of come after her, like he's aware enough that he still wants to, kill his wife. And I think she stabs him in the leg, and he runs off into the woods, and then he runs into Wyndham Earl. And then Wyndham Earl exploits Leo for a bit. Yeah, I mean, you're right? You almost do start feeling bad for Leo, who, even murder aside, was already beating Shelley and stuff, right? From the get-go, first time we see Leo, right? So I guess wrap up Leo here, as we were talking about Leo.
Yeah, we last see him with Wyndham Earl.
We see him with Wyndham Earl, and it seems Wyndham has hooked him up to some device. He's got some kind of hook in his mouth and spiders, like tarantulas, above him that will seem likely to result in his demise. And that is another cliffhanger in the season 2 finale.
Right.
We're just left with this kind of, I think, hilarious shot of Leo struggling, zooming up to the spiders. Cut to the next scene, right?
Right.
So.
I always thought of that as like a Hardy Boys motif or something. Like it has its own, okay, fill in the blank, whatever you want to happen to Leo. That's
Hardy
what
Boys
yeah.
and the tarantula trap.
Yeah. Okay, so, and then back to the Briggses, right?
Oh, right. So
Bobby's parents, we got Major Briggs.
Major Briggs, who is a fascinating character, right? We know over the course of the series that he's been involved with the Project Blue Book. He brings them and shows them footage of Wyndham Earl talking about the lodge, the Black Lodge, these magicians or sorcerers or Dugpas, he says they're called.
Right. But he's also experienced firsthand the White Lodge.
Major Briggs. So it would seem, right? Maybe we're speculating here, but, when he and Coop are out on their night fishing trip or whatever it is, Briggs disappears, right? And he's gone for a couple of days, right? When he disappears, there is that kind of flash of light and so on. It's at the very end of that episode, and you have the still shot at the end of that episode, I believe, is an owl framed by that whiteness, right, as it cuts to the music and the credits come up. But when Briggs then describes his experience after returning, it does seem quite likely that where Briggs went was the White Lodge, right? You also have, talking about Major Briggs and Bobby, you have that earlier scene in the first episode of season 2 where they run into each other at the diner. And the Major calls Bobby over and tells him about his vision, right, of this marble mansion and of his son, and which he wants to be clear was not a dream, which is just the subconscious mind,
right,
with whatever, categorizing the day's events or something. No, this was a vision. Right.
This also puts Bobby in tears and is a real
Bobby
important
breaks
connection
down crying.
Yeah.
And that's significant, right? Because before that, their relationship was a bit tendentious, right? I mean, it was always Garland yelling at Bobby for smoking cigarettes and stuff like this, right?
Where did we last see Major Briggs?
Well, if you remember, Major Briggs ultimately is taken captive by Wyndham Earl. Remember this? On purpose, right? Wyndham Earl like targets him, and this is all tied up with some of that stuff with Leo we were talking about before. Wyndham Earl's trying to get information out of him,
Right.
basically, about the lodges and all the rest.
Right. He's tying him up, torturing him, trying to get information, but Briggs is not.
Drugs him.
Yeah.
Right. All of that. And he ultimately does get some information out of him. But, it's a little piecemeal. But this is part of the process of Wyndham Earl figuring it out. Right. And the Owl Cave map and all of that. And how you get into the lodge. Right. And in particular, as I recall, the bit about love or fear being required in order to open the door.
Right.
Right. And I don't know if you remember too, Major Briggs at one point says his biggest fear is that love is not enough.
I remember that. Yeah.
So Leo actually lets Briggs go and says save Shelley, right? Because he's on to Wyndham Earl's whole plan with Queens and killing someone who wins Miss Twin Peaks or
Right,
whatever.
which kind of gives Leo some redemption after what we've seen.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's kind of an odd turn insofar as the last time Leo saw Shelley, he was trying to kill her. But I don't know. Maybe this fits, right? Like he's this controlling husband, and only he has the right to kill her, or something. I don't know exactly how you want to read that, or however you want to read that. But that would seem to be why Wyndham Earl sets him up in that tarantula trap.
That also mirrors Leland being really caring for Laura, but also being the one that was trying to kill her and killed her. Another similar story. That could be a duality.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. All right.
It's not necessarily just that he could be the only one to kill her, but that deep down he did actually care for her, but there was something else, some darkness inside of him that made him abusive.
Yeah, and we were talking before about the duality in the characters and so on, and this might be one of the only spots where maybe you see Leo do something good.
Right.
Right. Like we're trying to get everything into this last episode, maybe, right? So also that Doc Hayward loses his cool and stuff, right? So he does, okay. But regardless, so Leo lets Briggs go, and then he's stumbling through the woods, and then Hawk finds him, I believe. So then the very last time we see Major Briggs, if you recall, is in this scene in the season 2 finale in the Double R, which is overall kind of an odd scene, Mike, right? I mean, like there's this weird kind of time loop thing that happens, right? With a repetition of at least dialogue that was in the pilot involving this German waitress, Heidi.
Right? Yeah, Heidi comes in late. And
giggles
says her car wouldn't start.
Right.
Shelley responds saying,
like,
too busy jumpstarting the old man or something.
Again.
Yeah.
So, and we haven't seen her since the pilot, Heidi, right?
Right.
Right. So there's that. There's also the fact in the scene that people seem to be oddly like lovey-dovey, right?
Where Bobby says we should get married to Shelley.
Right,
yeah.
Which, I mean, okay, some people might think that might complicate my general position that they're kind of on the rocks at the end of the series, but at the same time, I don't know how much weight to put on this, right? Because there's also in this scene Major Briggs and his wife Betty, they're like making out almost in the booth.
Yeah, he's holding a cup of coffee that she drinks from. So there's a coffee element significant there.
And we've never seen them be that kind of engaged in public displays of affection.
Right.
It seems almost sort of out of character, right? So something weird seems to be going on, right? And then Dr. Jacoby comes in with Sarah Palmer. That's the last time we see those two, right? Actually, that's the very last time we see, right? They'd kind of been off the radar for a while.
And this also makes it seem like Jacoby has been treating Sarah, right? They've been working together.
One would presume, right? And it's because Jacoby comes over. Well, first he says, "Oh, you were right. There is the Major, right?" And they come over, and he tells Major Briggs that Sarah has a message for him. So, okay, what's the source of this message, right? Because when Sarah sits down and talks to him, it's in this distorted male voice, right? A lodge voice that. Backwards, forwards thing. But it's not her voice, it's a male voice, right?
Right.
And so was it that voice telling Jacoby there's a message for Major Briggs, or was it Sarah in
Or
a
was it
normal
Sarah
voice?
herself? Yeah.
We don't know. We don't see that. Right.
But the message is basically telling Briggs that Dale Cooper is in the Black Lodge.
Right. It's, I'm in the Black Lodge with Dale Cooper.
Okay.
Or Agent Cooper.
Mm-hmm.
And then it cuts to a scene in the lodge, and the voice continues, "I'm waiting for you."
Mm-hmm.
Right. Who is saying this? I thought it could be Wyndham Earle. You had another suggested
Well, I thought just because
here?
it's coming from Sarah, it might be Leland, who we know is in the lodge as well.
Right.
And because we know it's somebody saying, "I'm with Dale Cooper."
Right, yeah.
But the other thing is because the distorted nature of the voices, I'm not so sure I'm 100% convinced that it's the same voice that says, "I'm waiting for you."
That's true, too.
So
I had that
mm-hmm.
thought, too. When when it says, "I'm waiting for you," it seems to be a sort of higher pitched almost.
That might be the arm.
It sounds like it might be the arm. Yeah. Presumably, there are definitive answers about which actor spoke these lines. I don't know if people have found these definitive answers and we're just ignorant here. But I haven't found those answers, right? So I guess I always sort of thought it was Wyndham Earle, but I think your suggestion about Leland is interesting, right?
And I think it's also significant that Garland Briggs kind of is understanding. He's not shocked. He's just eyebrow raises.
Yeah.
And
well, he's sort of hip to this stuff to a certain extent.
So there's a lot in Secret History of Twin Peaks where it comes out that Briggs is really has a more full understanding of the metaphysical nature of all this stuff than we're led to believe throughout the original show.
Right, or he's been working at that outpost or Air Force Base or whatever, and Dougie Milford has kind of passed the torch to him, I guess, right, and all of that. And,
which circles back to Cooper, because Briggs in the book is thinking that Cooper will be the one to carry on this research, reaches out to Cooper, but too late, right, because Cooper's already gone into the lodge at that point. And then that connects us.
Yeah, and I don't know how to connect these two things together, right? One of the things about this diner scene is that it doesn't really seem to go anywhere, right? It's not like we don't have any indication that Briggs jumped up from the diner and ran to the sycamore trees or anything like that. So
right. But like you said, this is also the very last episode, and there might be a few things that are a bit forced to come out.
Well, and also, I mean, we don't know. I mean, how is this going to connect up to things in the new stuff, right? So I think it's at least worth noting that this scene is there, right?
Right.
And the kind of significance of Major Briggs as connected to this whole story about Cooper and the lodge and all of this weird stuff, right?
And we also know this scene takes place after Briggs disappears and then comes back again,
right?
Which is what prompts him to kind of reaffirm his relationship with his son Bobby. And they have that moment we discussed earlier.
Right.
And now we see that he's basically reconnecting, trying to be the family man again. He's been through something that makes him understand that my family is really what's important.
Yeah.
So that's definitely interesting and might have bearing on what we're about to see in The Return. In the last episode of Season 2,
yes,
we see, just like you just said, that fear or love is required to get into the lodge. We see that Wyndham Earle has kidnapped Annie.
Yeah,
and because of her fear,
he's going to use the fear.
He's going to use the fear to get in there. And once he gets her inside the sycamore grove, I remember that he lets go of her hand and he says, you can't, once you're inside these trees, you can't flee from me now. And Annie sort of adopts like she's hypnotized or something, right? They walk around the scorched engine oil and he takes her into the lodge.
Yes.
And then what happens?
Lodge craziness, for the most part, right? Yeah. But, of course, Cooper shows up, right? And then you get all of the weird stuff as it plays in the lodge. Cooper sees Annie, but then Annie turns into Caroline.
Right.
Right? So Heather Graham says, "I saw the face of the man who killed me. It was my husband." But then she says she's Caroline, whose husband was Wyndham Earle, right? We get that whole backstory sort of pieced out to us over the course of the show. That might be confirmation, I guess, that Wyndham Earle killed Caroline. Right. I don't know that we'd been told that before for sure.
I think Cooper says something at some point that kind of hints at that. I think Cooper at some point says something that hints at that.
Yes, he does, but I don't think it's that straightforward.
I see.
Until that moment. Now, prior to that, Cooper is holding his stomach, like where he got shot, and he sees himself with the bullet wound and Annie bloodied on the floor of the lodge. All right. What's going on?
Additionally, it could be thrown in there that Bob does not like Wyndham Earl, or
Wyndham
has cheated somehow.
Yeah, so
right?
I'm getting there.
Okay.
I was just rewatching this scene earlier today because you've got this weird stuff with Annie and Caroline. And then, so it's like Annie becomes Caroline, becomes Annie. Annie and Caroline are the same person. I don't know what they're trying to tell us here exactly. These are the two women that Cooper has loved that we know of.
Right, and the first time Wyndham says, I almost drove the boy to the brink, the first time.
Right.
Right.
And then, weird, surreal lodge dream logic or whatever. It seems like basically the same person turns into Wyndham Earl. Right. It's not like there's some, Michael Jackson black and white video transformation.
Right.
It's a cut edit, right?
Right.
That the person standing there is now Wyndham Earl, right? And Wyndham Earl basically tells him, Cooper, that he can save Annie if he gives Wyndham his soul, right? And Dale says, deal. And then Bob shows up and says, no, he cannot take your soul.
Yeah.
I'll take his.
Yeah, he's trying to work over my head here, and that does not work with Bob.
And then Wyndham's screaming, and there's like, I don't know if it's fire or what, whatever, like, shooting up out of him, or it's a soul shooting up out of him, or whatever. So it seems pretty clear that because Wyndham, I guess, like transgressed the rules in some way, that Bob killed him, or ate his soul, right? Like like at this like metaphysical level, right? And that would seem to be the end of Wyndham Earl. Annie, however, does appear when Cooper comes out of the lodge. He's carrying her, right, and so on. She's bloody. And
then we get a little bit of Annie in the missing pieces as well.
In the missing pieces, we see her in a hospital bed, and she wakes up and says the same thing she says when she appears to Laura in her vision in Fire Walk with Me, that the good Dale is in the lodge and can't get out, write it in your diary.
And she's wearing the jade ring in that moment.
She is, and the nurse takes it off her. Yeah. Right?
And the nurse wears it.
And the nurse wears it.
And you can tell just in a little moment, changes. Something about the nurse changes, and then she trots off, That's also, is that the first time we are seeing the ring? Because the ring's prominence is in Fire Walk with Me.
Yeah, the ring's really prominent in Fire Walk with Me.
So we'll get to that in a minute.
And I mean, that's also that missing piece. It's a weird, again, the missing pieces are deleted footage from Fire Walk with Me, right? That the first cut of Fire Walk with Me was apparently like 5 hours long.
Right.
And had footage of all of the characters from the show in it. And this just ended up on the cutting room floor. I mean, the film as it stands is like 2.5 hours long, right? And I have no idea how that would have fit in. I think it makes sense that they cut it, right? And what they did instead, now I'm speculating here about the filmmaking process, what they did instead, it would seem to me, is to have Laura have this vision where Annie shows up in her bed, all bloody, and says this thing to Laura, right? The good Dale is trapped in the lodge. And I mentioned to you before, I think my favorite thing about that scene, Laura sees the bloody Annie. She listens to her message. She turns and looks the other way. Looks back. Bloody Annie's gone. Now Laura screams and freaks out. Right? Just great little
the absence of Annie. But also she is given the ring in that moment.
Yeah, then Laura has the ring in her hand.
Right. So something about that ring that also I think adds to the tangible. It's not just a vision that's halfway between the waking world and a dream. She feels the ring in her hand, and it's like, whoa, something is real here at the physical level.
And then it's not clear exactly what happens to the ring after that point, though. I mean, it's in thinking about Fire Walk with Me, one question to ask potentially is about how linear it is. If we're just tracking the ring, so Teresa Banks had this ring, right? Bob's first victim, Leland Bob's first victim.
Right.
She's got it on in the photograph, right? That's confirmed. Of course, she was killed, right? Then Chet Desmond, Chris Isaac's character.
Yeah, he finds it at the trailer park.
Finds it underneath the trailer, which I think was the Chalfon's trailer, right?
Mm-hmm. Two Chalfons.
Two Chalfons.
According to Harry Dean Stanton's character, right?
Yeah, Carl Rod is his name.
Carl Rod.
So this is the moment when Chet Desmond disappears, right? He, well, actually, if you watch it, it depends how you want to interpret the visuals, right? He doesn't quite disappear. Instead, he sees the ring. He's bending over to pick the ring up. And what happens visually is a still frame. Am I using the right word here?
Mm-hmm.
It freezes.
Yeah, it freezes.
Right.
And then he fades away.
And then the whole footage fades to black.
Yeah.
It's not one of these things where we see Chet Desmond disappearing.
Right.
Right. The whole footage goes away. But then, of course, we're told by Gordon Cole or whatever that Chet Desmond has disappeared out there, right? So, okay, he disappears. Then we see the ring, as we mentioned, right? Laura wakes up from her dream or vision of Annie and seems to have the ring. The other times we see it, though, it's on the one-armed man's finger in that scene at the intersection, right?
Where he's waving it and saying, "Your father." And, Leland's revving the engine, and that's an intense scene. Yeah.
Right. Well, first of all, he says, you stole the corn, which I guess is Garmonbozia.
Creamed corn that we see in the sequence.
Yeah, this creamed corn as this symbol for pain and suffering, right? When they say Garmonbozia, they tell us in parentheses that they means pain and suffering. And what does creamed corn have to do with this, right? There's also...
well, I could see it as the manufacturing and the processing industrially of a natural thing,
It is kind of a great symbol in a way. And in the original run, when Donna does Meals on Wheels and Mrs. Tremont, the old lady, and there's the kid, in that scene she says, creamed corn. Do you see creamed corn on that plate? Right? So, okay, what is the...
And then the kid has it in his
hands. Yeah, the significance of the cream corn as the Garmonbozia. But yeah, in that scene, one-armed man Mike. I just generally think of him as Mike.
Yeah.
Or Philip Gerard is his more mundane persona who sells shoes. But in this scene, he seems to be Mike, right?
Right.
And he says, "You stole the corn. We had it canned above the store, and all of that." But he's got the ring there, right? And then ultimately, when it comes around to Laura's murder, Mike has the ring there, right? Because he runs up and throws it into the train car, right? Laura puts it on, and it's at that point that Leland starts yelling, "Oh, don't make me do this," which a lot of people think indicates that if you put the ring on, you're dead.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, a couple things about that, just to stop you for a second. So also we see the ring, the arm has the ring, and he says, speaking backwards, "With this ring I thee wed," and then they laugh, and Bob's in that scene as well, right?
Yes.
And they're laughing about that. I think you pointed that out. So just bringing up the idea of the classic ceremonial ring in a wedding, which is a symbol that you are bonded to another. So I like this idea that the ring itself means that there's a bond happening. When it comes to the ring, the physicality of the ring, I like the idea that it is itself a piece of manufactured nature, polished and taken from the ground, and worn as an ornament on somebody's finger. But it's also, in the sense, it could be said that it is kind of like a small portal that you're putting part of your body through. So it's like you have a physiological element passing through a natural element as a portal. And then I think it's worth examining the symbol itself that we've seen, which could denote looking like an owl. I've also, when I see it, I see that it could be like the Twin Peaks with a square in between them. And I often think that square maybe is the portal itself that is near the two Twin Peaks. And then additionally, in Secret History, we get further, going way back, we get a further history of the ring itself.
Yeah, right. And that symbol, I think one of the reasons why we might be led to think owl is that it's a symbol that's in Owl Cave.
Mm-hmm.
It does sort of look like an owl.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, there's this other stuff about owls,
Mm-hmm.
right? Okay. But yeah, I think fair enough. Some of these other connections, we do kind of have the two peaks there,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you look at it in the right way. Yeah, more about it in the Secret History. I don't know how much we want to go into this right now, but I mean,
Mm-hmm.
all the way back to Lewis and Clark, right?
Yep.
And these, which one was it? Was it Lewis?
There's Meriwether Lewis, that's given the ring.
He had the ring.
And he's
right?
told not to ever put the ring on. But we see it described in that way, and then there's, it takes you through the controversy of his death and how he died. Incidentally, just to kind of frame the secret history of Twin Peaks, it's very fascinating to me that there are so many real-world, actual historical incidents and documents that are in the book where, like you're kind of saying earlier, where Mark Frost is kind of like taking everything that's strange, unique, and fascinating subject to learn about that's maybe a little bit more strange and interesting than you thought it was initially, and wrapping all of that into the events of Twin Peaks.
Yeah, that was my line, something like this. It's like everything weird ever, and we're just going to like tie it into the Twin Peaks universe.
I love that.
Right? No, UFO sightings? No, that wasn't really,
Right.
that wasn't really UFOs. It's going to pertain in some way to, lodged beings of some sort or something. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and then the stuff, all of the like occultist stuff that's in there.
Mm-hmm.
It's, there are big rabbit holes we could potentially go down and talk.
Yeah, and I don't think we
some
need
of
to
this stuff.
specifically detail any of that because we want people to read the book. But there are basically, I think, three big ones, which is the Native American Nez Perce connection in the Northwest, and them already being privy to the possibility of kind of a porthole to another dimension existing near the waterfall in Twin Peaks, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a big part of it, and it takes you through the plight of Chief Joseph and his people, a lot of which is a nice lesson in history coming through a fictional project, which I think is amazing.
Yeah.
Another big part of it is a possible extraterrestrial element that's going on with this, where we have like the story of Margaret getting basically abducted by UFOs when she's a child. We have everything that is...
sorry, not to...
No, go ahead.
Well, Margaret and Carl Rod, I think,
Mm-hmm.
right? We're also Harry Dean Stan's character. That's confirmed. All of these people who we do know having these weird experiences.
As well as Dougie, who you mentioned
Milford,
earlier. And Dougie Milford not only had that experience, but because of his extraterrestrial experience in the book, it explains that he actually gets closer and closer in his career path to these secret projects studying UFOs, like Project Grudge, Project... what are they? Project Grudge, Project Blue Book.
Project Blue Book, ultimately. I think there's another name in there that we're not recalling right now. But yeah, I love this whole thing they do with Dougie all of a sudden, right? Because, again, if you remember Dougie from the original series, some people might not even remember Dougie from the original series, first of all.
Yeah, it's
right?
a bit part back then.
Yeah, Dougie Milford, he's the mayor's brother.
Yeah.
They're fighting, blah, blah, blah. Dougie marries this young Lana, who seems to have almost supernatural sexual attractiveness, right? Like, I think it's funny, but like all the men are instantly fawning over her anytime she's like talking,
right?
And then like Dougie has a heart attack on their wedding night, right? Like that's the whole arc, right? They're fighting. You get this backstory that he and his brother have always been sort of fighting, blah blah blah. He marries Lana, this younger woman. But yeah, so we find out in the secret history, or Mark Frost has decided that, oh no, Dougie Milford was way more than this, right? Dougie Milford was like a man in black. Yeah. And I don't know what other term to use necessarily, right? Because he's just like...
He's got the black car, he's got the black suit, he's involved in interrogating and investigating UFOs and encounters with UFOs.
High-level, secret, like, maybe even the agency he works for doesn't technically exist on the books, right? Yeah, very
the highest
like
level of security clearance,
Man in Black kind of stuff. Yeah, and that he was.
but it shows him go through Project Sign to
Mhm.
Project Grudge to the Blue Book project to MJ12. So they're incorporating all four of those big
all of this stuff, and they tell us that like he was there, when they're testing the nuclear bomb and stuff like this, and these connections. All again, as you said, all these historical events and figures, right? The fact that there's stuff about Nixon, and there's just a lot, right? But that deepening of Dougie Milford as a character was one of the things I appreciated.
I thought that was wonderful. And to take him through, so the big ones are, again, I think, visiting the Nez Perce and historically what is going on in Twin Peaks even before the logging companies arrived there, through Meriwether Lewis. The other part being through Dougie's story, seeing him encountering the UFO element and the extraterrestrial encounters element. And then the third one that I thought was a big part of that is the occult stuff that they bring in there with people like Aleister Crowley and Jack Parsons, who are basically ritualistically trying to open a rift to another world using basically explosives, using rocketry and this stuff. So I thought that was super fascinating too. It's another one of those things that you could picture having a subtle conversation with Mark Frost, just like, oh, have you heard about Jack Parsons and this whole ritualistic kind of approach to the occult? There's JPL.
Well, and it creates this weird interpretive situation, I think, because for someone like me who, is more familiar with some of the stuff than others, coming across some of these mentions, like the Jack Parsons thing, you're more familiar with than I am, it seems. But I come to this in Secret History and I think, well, this sounds fascinating. And I start thinking about researching this in the real world.
Right.
Like it's going to help me understand Twin Peaks.
Right.
Right. But the whole thing that's going on in the Secret History almost seems to be the other way around. Right? That the real world thing's being tied in, but the real explanation is in the Twin Peaks
is the
mythology,
fictional story.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So interpretative, in terms of interpreting this, it creates a really weird kind of space that I think is interesting, right? Because it's not like you could say, oh, well, I got this thing in Twin Peaks because it's referring to this real world thing, when the real world thing is something like Jack Parsons or like, the Thelema thing or some other occult thing, right?
Oh, yeah, the story of L. Ron Hubbard and him rising and learning basically how to develop a religion to get rich and stuff like that.
Right, so if there's some kind of connection between the ideas in Twin Peaks now and the ideas of these, like, really kind of out there human beings in real history, what's the reality here, right? Like, what's the ground of interpreting what into what, I guess is what I'm trying to point
Well, like
to.
I said, I think it's like I mentioned earlier in the podcast where there's a higher level thing going on than just making an interesting narrative happen. There's things that we relate to that are important to us developing as a society, and also individually coping with maybe trauma that some viewers have been through in their own lives. I think when you're watching Twin Peaks, and this carries true with The Return too, the artwork itself, the show itself, is helping us process this stuff, and I think it's even in the definition of the mystery that Lynch likes to put forward, where the mystery kind of triggers this curiosity that gets us to reflect and strengthens us. It strengthens how we think, and I think it's really amazing. And then when we're examining what they're tying into, it just goes to show how amazing is Twin Peaks, that the real events that are significant enough in themselves that have happened in real life are footnotes to this narrative story. That's a fictional story that somebody just came up with. There are footnotes to it. And yet, if you really look into them and you see, oh, wow, Chief Joseph and that whole thing is real, how significant is that? How important is that for us to address that? We're the inheritors living in this country of that legacy.
Yeah.
And so to tell a modern day story that's just about a murder, quote unquote, but really it ties into like the rape of the natural world, the metaphysical studies, the occult, and politics and power. It's quite fascinating that you could that is even possible for a writer to do, and yet here it is.
Right. Well, and one of the things we were talking about too is the FBI, right? Like, all right, so Cooper's the good guy, but this general move towards framing the FBI as the good guys I think it's also less straightforward in the Twin Peaks world, right? I mean, are we really going to make that move? Are we really thinking the FBI are the good guys? I mean, think about the real world, right? And tying in these things and the secret history and so on, too, right? I mean, like, it seems the way it's originally framed in the show, like, okay, well, you've got Wyndham Earle, who's some nut job who wants to get into the lodge for his own power, I guess, right? But he was working for the government originally, right?
Right.
He was involved in Project Blue Book and so on and so forth. Now, okay, eventually they decided he was like too unhinged or whatever, right? He gets like, what's the term? We're told he like escaped from an insane asylum or something, right? Institutionalized is the word I wanted there. But what about the rest of them, right? I mean, if you look at some of the stuff in the secret history, what Dougie's getting into, these other government agents, doesn't exactly seem innocent or on the side of the good, right?
Right, this is back to this duality motif, but only you're talking about it on the largest scale you can imagine it. Not just the duality of one character, but the duality of a whole institution and, like, what are the real goals here, you know?
And ultimately we're told Dougie is tasked with keeping an eye on these things in Twin Peaks, right? And then he passes the torch to Major Briggs. That this observing station or whatever is really, right, they're not observing outer space, really. They're really observing what's going on in the woods around Twin Peaks.
Right.
And Dougie was responsible for that, and he passes it on then to Major Briggs. So, you know, of all the characters, Major Briggs does kind of stand out as one who seems almost unequivocally good, right? I mean, I can't think of any time when he did anything that seemed particularly suspect. I mean, the most moral gray area for his character is maybe when he's refusing to tell our heroes things because of, you know, it's classified. But even that, right? I mean, okay, you're following the rules. It's classified, right? So, Major Briggs might be a good guy, but the Air Force, right? I mean, I think those questions are there.
Yeah, it's
you know.
similar to Leland and Bob. It's
Yeah.
like, is Leland inherently a good character that was corrupted? Or is this some sort of exterior influence corrupting him to bring action that is in itself corrupt, you know?
Yeah.
The embodiment. Again, the duality, which is great. And which could be argued is also the, you know, human will versus nature thing. And, of course, in Secret History, when they're bringing in Thelema, and a lot of that is about Crowley's ideas of, like, the will itself, you know, do what thou wilt, shall be the whole of law. I think it's fascinating to incorporate some of that stuff, too, because it's one's will, and which would subvert all other ethics, right? Which is the nature of then thinking, okay, well, that's evil or whatever, because it could subvert all of that just based on being one's will. But whose will? Is it Leland's will? Is it Bob's will? Is it Briggs? Is it the government? You know.
Well, and also we might think here about, you know, this question of the will, maybe thinking about desire, and these dualities, right? We talked about sort of man versus nature, but I suggested earlier that might be a little bit too simple. And maybe this is sort of what I was thinking of, right? Another kind of duality would be between what we want and what we need, that we need things as natural beings, right? And you could maybe get a certain kind of harmonious picture of thinking about satisfying one's needs as a natural being, as an animal or what have you, in sort of harmony with nature overall.
Versus desire of want.
Right.
And a character that maybe doesn't need anything, but wants something.
Yeah. But I mean, but beyond that, right, just about being human in general, right? I mean, that we're weird.
Yeah.
I mean, we're sort of metaphysically weird insofar as we can, like, actively want, desire, will things that are to our own detriment, right? We're not just talking about things that go beyond what we need, but things that can be in direct conflict with that. So,
Very fascinating. It goes so deep, actually, and this is part of the attraction to it. The whole narrative and the mythos of it all, I think, really is that it does go that deep into the psychology of humanity. So also, I think there's a few things in Fire Walk With Me that we should come back to and sum up a little bit, which would be a good way to end this podcast, because that's basically the last thing that we were given before the publications of the books and then finally the return.
Right. Of course, people were pissed off about that movie, right?
Oh, yeah.
You know, you've got all these cliffhanger endings that we've kind of pointed to, maybe the biggest one being like, what's going on with Dale Cooper, right? Which we also discussed. The right answer to who your favorite character is Cooper, right? So everyone's like, what's going on with Cooper? And then Lynch is like, oh, we're going to make a Twin Peaks movie. And so probably, you know, everyone's like, awesome. And then the movie ends up being a prequel about the last days of Laura Palmer.
Right. Which I think is super fascinating, but also is totally counter to a lot of people's expectations of what they were going to get.
Right.
There's a cliffhanger where like, wait, no, you might get the cliffhanger. Maybe it'll be 25 years in the future. But now we're going to show you, you know,
well, yeah,
Laura
and
Palmer.
no one at the time, Mike, no one at the time thought when in that last episode, right? Or actually, I think it's in the earlier episode even. Anyway, when Laura in the lodge says to Cooper, I'll see you again in 25 years, I guarantee you, no one was sitting there in 1991 going, well, guess there's going to be a revival in 2016.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
No, right? Even, you know, one of these more recent interviews, it seemed like Lynch didn't even fully remember that was there as this dangling thread.
Right.
Like there was no plan at that point, right? For this, it was why the 25 years. This is something we might want to think about and get into as we're, you know, moving forward here. It does seem like there's some kind of temporal logic at play there in terms of, I don't know, something related to when the lodge is open, I guess.
Yeah, I think there is once every 25 years, there's an opportunity.
Yeah, so I mean, that's probably all they were thinking of at that
Mm-hmm.
point when they were originally.
Yeah, I think it is a convenient thing that one day a light bulb went on and somebody said, oh my God, imagine if we could do this.
Yeah.
When I think of Fire Walk With Me, one of the things that intrigues me the most is that we've seen 2 seasons of a show that really revolved around losing this character from the town that everybody loved and played a specific role in a lot of people's lives, but we never really saw her walking around living and being Laura Palmer.
Right.
And so there are some things that we learn in Fire Walk With Me, but just the idea, first of all, what it means to take a series and then turn for a filmmaker to then be thrust into TV and to make an episodic television, and then to take that and to make a feature-length film. Like you said, going backwards in time and actually showing us Laura Palmer living.
Yeah.
You know, and at that point, everybody knows who's killed her. Everybody knows the trauma that's happened. But we're going back, and it's all the more almost a bitter pill to swallow to watch her in the days before the trauma hits and leading up to it.
Yeah, because, you know, when a fire like this starts, it's very hard to put out. Right?
Exactly. And there are some things I think that we find out about Laura's life that why she was so important. We know that we find out about her role with Meals on Wheels stuff. We find out about her role caring for the Horn's disabled son, Johnny. Mm-hmm. We find out about her, and we see firsthand these things. We see her caring for Harold.
I think that these things are mentioned in the original series, right? But we
but
actually
to see her visiting Harold, right, and which is a character we haven't really mentioned that much. But of course, he's shut in, and he can't stand the world. He's got agoraphobia. He can't go outside.
Well, yeah.
But Laura brings the world to him.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about Harold for just a minute.
Yeah.
Because you're right. We didn't talk about Harold. I mean, of course, part of why we didn't talk about Harold is because by the time the second season ended, he was long dead.
Yep.
Right? He killed himself. Now, to refresh everyone's memory here, Donna started doing the Meals on Wheels. She found him. She found out that Laura had hid her secret diary with him. So apparently Laura trusted him quite a lot, right? Harold, as you said, can't leave his house or apartment or whatever it is. And so he also then wants to record Donna's story. So he's very interested in people's stories, and he grows orchids, of course, right? And so, but then Donna's trying to get Laura's diary out of there, right? And Harold, perhaps in part because he feels betrayed or whatever, he kills himself, right? But his note is J'ai un homme solitaire. I am a lonely soul, right? Which you see Andy then repeating, like, because
Right.
of course Andy's haunted by it because, this is the kind of sweetheart who cries over a dead body and so on.
Yes.
But, part of what triggered me wanting to talk about this a little bit more right now is that I think given the whole surrounding metaphysics of the show, it's not exactly clear why Harold can't leave. You know what I mean? Right? Like, is it that Harold can't leave because he's just got some mental disorder? Well, given that it's Twin Peaks.
Well, I think it certainly seems like it's an agoraphobic kind of thing where it's the space. He can't go outdoors. But at the same time, that I don't know if that's ever specifically said, but what we do see when he, Donna trying to get him to go outdoors, for example, is that he's looking up into the sky.
And he kind of like shakes.
And he's got a really physical reaction to, I can't be out there under the sky. And knowing a little bit more about what we know from Secret History, there could be other interpretations to that.
Yeah.
Maybe he is, like Margaret, somebody else who has had a strange experience in the woods around Twin Peaks.
It kind of reminds me of, I don't know if you've been watching or other people have been watching Better Call Saul, but Chuck's character with the electricity and stuff. Like, something about Harold's reaction there seems like it's at a more visceral bodily level.
Yeah.
But, again, people do have all kinds of, mental disorders, so... Don't want to write that off, just given that it's Twin Peaks, right? Like, there could be some deeper metaphysics at play.
Right. But as a supporting character to Laura, he's one of the characters that shows us, like, just how good Laura was and how Laura really was at the crossroads of a lot of people's garmambosia, right? She was healing people in Twin Peaks, and so to lose Laura was to lose that healing element, and for a lot of people to then increase their suffering increased tremendously.
Well, it seems like, with Harold and Jacoby and, there's all this stuff where it really does seem like Laura was this kind of person who was really empathetic, I guess is what I want to say, right? And kind of willing to take people on their own terms. Of course, the bigger arc of Fire Walk With Me, though, is her own really, destruction.
Her own descending into, that kind of suffering of her own,
right?
Which to a lot of the other characters, she's kind of playing the role that they want her to be. That's apparent with Bobby and James, whereas, and that's apparent with Donna, really. And she's kind of a protective role over Donna, where she's like, no, you don't wear my stuff, don't turn into this,
Right, but there's also all this stuff in there about no one really knowing her, right? Even Donna doesn't know, right? And I think that level of projection, as you say, is part of what's going on there, right? Like, everyone's kind of viewing her as they want to view her, right? And so no one really knows her. Now, I don't know if that's just a problem for Laura Palmer or if that's a problem for people more generally, that we're dealing with how other people see us and what their images are of us, and are they really getting, who we are or whatever. But it is clear that Laura's struggling with that, right? And she says it fairly explicitly. And that I think there's a level of commentary there, about the sort of beautiful young woman, homecoming queen, and everything else, right? How everyone's viewing her. And we find out she's also, doing drugs and working at One Eye Jack's, I think. And, and all of this darker stuff.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and then it seems that the only time Laura Palmer is honest outwardly about any of this is in her diary, right? So the role of the diary, where she's never really honest with anybody else, not a single person really gets the full, complete picture.
Right. Except maybe Harold. Again,
he's got the diary.
Harold's a minor character.
Well, we see in Fire Walk With Me the moment where she turns and her teeth are yellow and she's like growling, and it really just scares the hell out of Harold.
That's true. Yeah.
There's that even that moment where he's at a loss. He thinks he knows.
Right.
But I feel like there's even in that moment, but that's her almost absorbing a Bob or Bob himself or something like that.
It's a good reference, though, that you're right. That even if in some way Harold is coming the closest to getting the experience of, I don't know, true Laura, if we want to call it that. Yeah, you're right. That even then there's this level of darkness that creeps out that You didn't know about that.
Yeah.
Right.
There's a little passage. I'm just going to read this because it's very short. There's a little passage in The Secret Diary of Laura Palmer, which, again, is one of these publications that hits us after the show. She says, "Inside me there is something no one knows about, like a secret. Sometimes it takes over, and I drift back deep into darkness. This secret tells me I will never grow older, never laugh with friends, never be who I should if I ever reveal its name. I cannot tell if it is real or if a dream. I cannot tell if it is real or if I dream of it. For when it touches me, I drift off. No tears come, no screams. I am wrapped up in a nightmare of hands and of fingers and of small, tiny voices in the woods. So wrong, so beautiful, so bad, so Laura." And then there's a footnote after she writes that as a poem saying, "I have to go home now. It is too dark. This is not a nice place for me to be right now." So I think in here it's very poetic. It's, of course, a little bit like sophomoric sounding, like a teenager writing a poem, and it would sound like this. But when you know what you know about Laura and you read this, you realize there's some really profound awareness inside of her that, these tiny voices and the voices from the forest even and the darkness. And she's referencing all these things that later we're finding, how aware was she of what she was up against? And here's the thing, the whole previous series and all that we've seen was post-mortem Laura, right?
Right.
Will Laura Palmer come back in the new one? So the return, to me, is like, can you do much more with her? But if she comes back, in what sense will it be?
I mean, she does tell Cooper she'll see him again in 25 years. Right. I mean, if that's kind of the opening, yeah. But I mean,
you know what I mean? Like, to
how
what
much?
extent?
Yeah, to what
exactly.
extent? To what extent?
Yeah.
Because
and her awareness, like, basically how much of a force is she just happened to be the girl that was subject to Bob, or was she the one that absorbed all that for a reason?
We shall see.
And so I'm very excited to see the unfolding of the return. It's going to be amazing.
Indeed.
So a couple of the things, just some loose ends here before we wrap up. Philip Jeffries.
Oh, we didn't talk about Jeffries.
Yep, another. Of course, David Bowie we just lost last year, and David Bowie is a titan when it comes to...
Oh, it breaks my heart.
Yeah. Just a titan when it comes to, giving us art in the world and giving us even the visual element and questioning reality, the UFO stuff, the man who fell to Earth, and all these metaphysical ideas that Bowie throughout his career always gave. And then to picture him and the practicalities of who he is to Cooper and the FBI. And then, because he was so important in Fire Walk With Me, and because we've lost him recently, I think it's important just to kind of bring him up and just at the end here and just kind of say...
Well, and it's also, it ties in terms of big mysteries that linger and questions about these lodge beings and everything, right? Because if anyone doesn't recall, what happens in Fire Walk With Me is Agent Philip Jeffries, played by David Bowie, just shows up at FBI headquarters, right? You've got this weird scene where Dale Cooper is like looking at the surveillance tape and then walking back out into the hall and walking back in and walking back out. And then he ultimately sees himself on the surveillance footage and Jeffries walk past him, which, okay, that's strange. But regardless, we're told already at that point that he's the long-lost Philip Jeffries, Gordon Cole says. He says something like, "You might have heard about him at the academy." Okay. But Jeffries comes in and says, we're not going to talk about Judy. And then starts going on about how he's been to one of their meetings, right? And we get then this footage of all of these, what are we calling them? Lodge beings as a general term,
Sure.
I guess. You've got Bob, you've got the Arm is there, both grandmother and grandson are there, the Tremonts or Chalfonts, maybe. And some others, right? You've got like some other guys wearing flannels and stuff like that. And Monkey. And
disturbing close-up monkey footage.
Disturbing close-up monkey footage, and maybe I haven't cataloged all of them, right? But it's just this extended scene of people doing the thing where it's like they're talking backwards and then it's been reversed, right? And all of the lines are cryptic, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is where we get what you mentioned before with the with this ring, Ivy Wed.
Mm-hmm.
And there's other things in there, right? I mean, I would encourage people to go and rewatch that, and really all the scenes like that. But I don't know. I just love all of the really weird stuff.
Yeah.
But I also am the kind of person who watches this stuff, and it's at that moment where I'm somehow thinking, this is where the answers are,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which is just great, because you're sitting there trying to like parse out answers from these lines. Like, I mean, even just the line electricity.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, what's up with electricity,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you've seen there's that shot of the power pole in the trailer park right before Chet Desmond disappears too. We didn't mention that.
Yeah.
So there's all this stuff where I'm like, now I'm thinking about electricity, and there's noises along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so you get this bit where Jeffrey shows up and then he just disappears. And then there's this question about whether he was actually even ever there,
Mm-hmm.
right?
It causes a lot of confusion in that moment between Cole and Cooper.
Well, yes, someone says something like, I just talked to the front desk. He was never here.
Right.
I want to say that's Albert. Our
Mm-hmm.
friend. We haven't talked about Albert. But Albert is being skeptical about everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then they go and they check that surveillance footage again. He's on the surveillance footage, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's like, he was here. He wasn't here. Where did he come from? Where did he go?
Well, it begs the question. I mean, surveillance footage is electricity,
Right.
signal
yeah.
flow, versus an embodiment of him there. Right. So, there's that.
We do
duality.
see him get off the elevator in what we're shown, but it's still, like,
But when he walks by Cooper doesn't notice he's there. When Cooper goes out and looks
Correct.
at the camera,
right. So
if he passes him in that
he's,
moment, he's maybe on a different dimension
he's
or ethereal.
maybe, not fully material or something.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that we should mention here is that one of the lines that Jeffries says in that scene is he points at Cooper and he says, who do you think that is there?
Mm-hmm.
And Gordon calls it, what do you mean, Jeffries? That's Special Agent Dale Cooper, right? Well, I mean, given the bit with the sort of doppelgangers and all of that,
Mm-hmm.
in the season 2 finale, well, So does Jeffries have some kind of insight about that?
That's something I wonder. Also, the idea that in Fire Walk with Me, we see Laura having that vision where she sees Annie, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Annie says that the good Dale is in the lodge.
Yeah.
But that's before Laura Palmer is killed. That's before Dale Cooper has anything to do with Twin Peaks at all. So
Yeah.
how do you explain her having visions, and the name, especially in a vision, enough so that she's told, write it down in your diary? She writes it down. So we have Dale Cooper's name in Laura Palmer's diary before Dale Cooper has anything to do with Twin Peaks or anything.
Yeah, so it would seem. So, I mean, this question about time and the time logic is going to be something we're going to have to talk about more as we move forward,
Mm-hmm.
I think, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
There are a number of things here already at play. If you think back to the original series in Fire Walk with Me, you mentioned one of them. Annie seems to appear to Laura when Laura's still alive, but Annie's already been in the lodge
Mm-hmm.
weeks later. It's really,
Yeah.
I don't know if it matters that it's only been a few weeks. It's still like something weird's going on with the time. And of course there are weird things going on with time with like the giant when he appears to Cooper after he's been shot.
Mm-hmm.
And he gives him these clues, right? The owls are not what they seem, and a man in a smiling bag and without chemicals. He points. When you've found these things to be true, I'll give you your ring back. That's how it goes,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so the giant knows Cooper's future, apparently. At least to this extent, right?
Mm-hmm.
At least to the extent where by saying this, he can be confident that Cooper's going to recognize these things happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the relationship between those types of beings and ordinary time seems to be I don't know what it is exactly.
Well, it's skewed at the very least.
It's odd, right?
Yeah.
And it's nothing as simple as saying that there's somehow operating from the perspective of eternity or whatever, right?
Right.
Because, you've got the one time we see Cooper in his dream in the early episode, right? It's an aged Cooper, right? It's in that lodge space or in the Red Room that we have Laura, or the being who looks like Laura but whose arms sometimes bend back. I don't know. Maybe it's not Laura.
Right.
Saying, I'll see you again in 25 years. So it seems like, okay, well, time does pass, right? So they're not completely outside of time, but their relationship to time seems to be different than ours. And I don't know what else to say about that right now, but I just want to mark that I think, as we move forward, one of the things I'm interested in talking about is this question about time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. One other thing that I think is really fascinating is there's kind of a Rashomon element going on here, right? Where in a series we see the town's perspective. We go back in time, we see Laura's perspective a bit more. So there's, just in those two, we're seeing basically the same thing that happens through these different filters of different characters. So I think that'll be interesting to see going forward too with The Return. It's 25 years later in production and in the story. And are we going to get that kind of element happening too, where this time travel, skewed time thing could be less about time and more about consciousness, more about kind of who's witnessing, and we have memory, we have dream, and we have waking reality, right? And so if the lines are blurred between across multiple characters, you get this kind of jumping around of consciousness, which is also fascinating when it comes to analyzing kind of the doppelganger figures, and all the metaphysical stuff that the Secret History of Twin Peaks is bringing up. So we've talked about, space-time, and we've talked about possible demons in different dimensions and stuff, but just really the idea of consciousness itself being something that's broader than the characters. You have this idea that there's consciousness of one character, or as, like in certain Indian Dharma or something, it might be said where, like, for example, karma, that in Indian Buddhism is believed that, that there's a karma of an individual, there's a karma of a town, but then a whole city-state will have its own karma, a whole nation, and that the earth, in fact, itself has a karma that we all share, and a shared consciousness. Well, it very well could be. Yeah, that might be the issue.
Yeah.
But I love analyzing all these things through the filter of the show and the show's creators, because they've done a great job of, creating this whole cast that it's so complex, and there's so many connections between them all. That's the other thing we haven't really addressed, is that these connections that exist between people that grow up in a small town together, where kind of like everybody's kind of inside everybody else's business, and then when you get an outsider, the outsider in a small town sees that town completely different, than how they're seeing themselves. And with Cooper, you have a character that's the outsider that's coming into town, and his mission is to learn the town. Yeah. And he inevitably becomes one of the people in this town.
Well, it's great then to get a little bit more about Albert in here, because I don't know. But that dichotomy then, right? That on the one hand, you have Cooper who's coming there and he's like, man, what kind of trees are these? And so on and so forth, right? Whereas Albert shows up, and I think, to be charitable to Albert, we could recognize, like, Albert he's city folk, right? Like, he's a city guy, right? And so he's come into this more rural place, and he's just like, these people are just like backwards, right? Like, they don't know what they're doing, right? So he sees Andy as almost incompetent in his bumbling, and he kind of is, right? So, but Albert is a really interesting character. Of course, another actor who's recently passed away. But Albert as that cynical hard edge, right? But then ultimately, I don't know if he softens a bit or what, but when that moment when he and Harry finally come to some understanding, when Albert goes on his big speech about, like, believing in nonviolence and love, and
Yeah.
he ends up saying, "I love you, Sheriff Truman," or whatever. I just think it's just like Albert. You get this great picture of that kind of like, I don't know, man. Like, this is like a New Yorker or something, and he's totally serious. I believe he's totally sincere. Right, he's like, I live in the tradition of Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. and everything like that.
Yeah,
and he's totally sincere. At the same time, he's prickly, right? Like he is maybe a bit cynical about the world, but he does really believe in like truth and justice and love. And I don't know. I'm a big fan of Albert.
Yeah, I agree. But he's also more concise than Coop, where Coop is willing to go down this rabbit hole. Albert is like I said earlier, like, well, maybe Bob is just the evil that men do. Let's go home. So.
Well, yeah, but I mean, there is a, there is the point too where Albert's like, no, Coop, do whatever you need to do to catch this guy.
Yeah.
Go throw rocks at bottles, whatever path you need to go down.
Yeah, exactly.
Like this is important.
Yeah.
Right. But they have the scene in Fire Walk with Me too. Where Albert's grilling Cooper because Cooper thinks he's having, or is having, I guess, visions of Laura, like prior to her death. And Albert's like, well, what do you know about her? And he goes, well, she's in high school. She's sexually active.
She's
using drugs.
Like, oh, that narrows it down.
That's half the high school girls in America.
Yeah.
I mean, Albert's got his head on straight.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, which is interesting because across the board, and one other character we haven't really talked about that much, so maybe it's a good place to end also after Albert, is Gordon Cole.
Right.
So you get kind of a spectrum of the FBI, right? Not only in age and what they've witnessed, but in their abilities, right? Coop is a little bit more fantastic and a little bit more willing to experiment to find the answer. Albert is very, cut and dry mathematically. Let's address this. And then we have Gordon Cole, who is basically the boss, calls the shots. But there's a few things about the physicality of Gordon Cole that are interesting in themselves. His issue with hearing, which hearing tests and are one of the things that will disqualify you from, being a pilot, getting into the Air Force, and certainly, being in top positions of authority when you're using a weapon and when you're commanding people and all this. But we get the impression that maybe something has happened in his career that has caused his hearing loss.
Yeah.
But there's a couple scenes where he can hear Shelley talk.
Yeah, which is
strange. It's like, what is his hearing based on? Is it not just pressure waves? Is there some sort of like romantic idea?
I know that there's like some theory out there that Gordon Cole can only hear truth or something. Like I don't know if that really holds up, right? But you're all right that we have that just sort of odd thing where he can hear Shelley perfectly.
Yeah.
Right.
And he's so impressed by that. It's obvious the character has never met another person that's the case with, right? Because he's stunned. He's like, wow, I can hear you. But from Shelley's perspective, it's really a funny moment because she's like, okay, yeah, so can everybody else hear. And that in some sense he wants to get closer to her, and it's maybe a romantic moment for him where he's kind of fond of Shelley, maybe because of that.
Well, he does kiss her, right? That also plays into, I don't know how much role it plays into the feeling, at least. I at least left the series with the feeling that Shelley and Bobby were kind of on the outs.
Yeah.
That we didn't see them officially break up or anything like that. Not in an explicit way, but I kind of feel like their relationship was at least on the rocks and probably going to end. I don't know. I'm speculating about an ending. But the kind of hilarious scene with Gordon Cole when he says, you're about to witness a 3/4 view of a kiss between two adults or something like
exactly.
that.
And it's really deliberate and it's really scientifically described. And,
And of course, I mean, the fact that this is a character played by David Lynch himself is maybe worth noting here.
Yeah.
What leads to the decision to put oneself in one's work. How significant is Gordon Cole, maybe, or what is the significance of that very fact that Lynch would have made this decision to be this character, right?
Well, I think it also speaks to the duality that's throughout this as a motif that we keep talking about, that there's even him as the director being one of the characters. He's directing Special Agent Dale Cooper in the narrative, and in real life, he's directing Kyle MacLachlan.
Right,
so.
Yeah. And we are told in Fire Walk with Me that the whole Blue Rose thing is Gordon's project,
right?
Basically, right? I think the reference is something like one of Gordon Cole's Blue Rose cases, right? So that the possessive there would seem to indicate that it is Gordon who is in charge of that aspect. And what is the Blue Rose?
Yeah, just to analyze that for a minute, right?
Yeah.
It seems to be that like an X-File or something, like it's related to some metaphysical thing, or is it specifically a UFO case, something about this kind of interdimensional travel in the woods? But it's something it's a very exceptional case.
Yeah, we're not really told. You have the great scene with Dancing Lil with the sour face, and then the scene interpreting all the aspects of
where Chester Desmond is explaining it.
He's explaining to Sam Stanley, what it means that the dress is tailored. Oh, that's code for drugs, and then.
But the Blue Rose is the one thing.
You get to the Blue Rose, right? And he's like, I can't tell you about that.
Yeah. But he says to him, "Did you notice the Blue Rose?" He says, "Yeah." So.
Oh no, he said. I think he says something like, "Did you notice anything pinned to the dress?"
Yeah. But he's trying to get this Sam Stanley recognized.
He's pumping him for the Blue Rose, and then Stanley goes like, "The Blue Rose," and then the response is just, "I can't tell you about that."
Can't tell you about
that. Which I don't know. He doesn't say I won't tell you. Of course, then he leaves Sam Stanley behind at one point to go back to the trailer park right before he disappears. And at that point, Stanley says, "You're going back for the Blue Rose." Right. I don't know. He's speculating. He's guessing.
Right.
But yeah, what is the Blue Rose? It definitely seems like it's indicating cases that are related to all of this weird stuff, right? And so what else is in there? How far does this go back, right? Like how many files are in the drawer labeled Blue Rose in Cole's office that he presumably has, right? We don't really know. I mean, one would presume Teresa Banks is not the first one. I mean, it kind of can't be if the Blue Rose is already this kind of symbol, right? So...
Yeah, so hopefully we'll find out some more about that in the return as well.
Yeah.
And just inherently, just a symbol of it itself is basically an unnatural, a paradox, right? An unnatural event that is totally counter to everything else you've observed in nature, right?
Yeah, I mean, as a symbol, it does... so
I think it works very well.
It sort of functions, right? It's as a symbol for the... paranormal or paranatural almost, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
The next podcast we record is going to dive into Twin Peaks: The Return. We'll be analyzing episodes 1 through 4 in that next recording. After that, we're going to do a third podcast that's going to analyze episodes 5 through 8. And then we'll be caught up to episode 9, which is coming soon. And then from then on, we're going to do one episode per podcast that we record, so we can really dig in and keep analyzing as the show goes on. So although right now we have seen a bit of the return, we're analyzing some old stuff. By our fourth podcast, we will be analyzing what all the fans had just recently been exposed to, and we'll be on board and caught up then.
Right, and that's really the idea. Right now we're just playing catch up. So hopefully there are people out there who are interested in that, and hopefully there are people who feel like we are getting a level of, depth or what have you, because that's what I'm hoping to do here.
Yeah, and I feel like we haven't even really begun to do that. Right, so once we start talking about the new stuff, that's really our goal, is to get into analyze that stuff. And we know as of now, this moment, we have another 10 episodes coming. And then even once they wrap the show up, it's been announced that Mark Frost is releasing Twin Peaks: The Final Dossier. So the follow-up to Secret History of Twin Peaks, which we will go through after we get to see this whole series unfold. Yeah,
that'll be kind of interesting. I mean, we'll read that, and we'll do, another podcast on it when it comes out. What I think is really going to be interesting about that, Mike, is that, how many people are going to read that book? I mean, certainly people are going to read it, right? But not as many people who are going to watch the show, Right. So
Well, I think over time there's
it'll
been
be-
like a filtering process, right? That if you were into Twin Peaks, you might have seen the whole original series. If
Yeah.
you're really into Twin Peaks, you saw Fire Walk with Me also.
Right.
If you're really, really into Twin Peaks, like us, then you're really, really loving The Return right now. And if
Right.
you make it, and if you've read Secret History, Laura Palmer's Diary, the Access Guide, Welcome to Twin Peaks, and all of its novel fun, and you get to the point where you really read the final dossier, that's the full package, it would seem,
Yeah.
from what we know now.
Yeah.
That means that you're going the whole ride.
Yeah, so we're doing it. We're going expert, platinum package. I just think culturally it'll be interesting, don't you? That, I mean, people are watching the show. They're watching The Return.
Yeah,
But then to have another book after it,
right.
you know.
And we can only speculate, but how interesting would it be to see which, who's going to write that dossier, the final, who's going to be capable of summing everything up at the very end. Okay, so Cameron, it's been really great discussing this, and honestly, I really look forward to over-analyzing all the rest of it that we're going to get. This is a very big highlight of my week now. It's just amazing that weekly we get increments of Twin Peaks again.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just amazing to think that that's possible.
I get so excited
Yeah.
every time it's come on.
And just to catch everybody up so that they know exactly where we are when we recorded this first show, we just saw episode 8.
Yeah.
And for once you figure out what that means,
Yeah,
that's when I saw episode 8, I was profoundly like, oh yeah, this is 100% the best thing that I'm into.
Certainly since episode 8 has aired, I've been sort of through the looking glass, you know, just I'm thinking about this stuff all the time. And Mike, I appreciate you doing this.
Yeah, this is a lot of fun. I look forward to many more of them. And so I guess we'll also say just the basics. Like, please let us know what you think. Any feedback, any comments, any of that is appreciated. And stay with us because it's going to be an awesome ride.